Chapter 802. As soon as Yushu got home, she locked herself in the study and couldn't wait to take out the sword case that she had placed on the top of the bookshelf to collect dust. It was getting late. She lit up the 2 candlesticks and placed them on the tea table. She turned around and sat on the long couch. She took out the sword case and took out the ancient sword. She placed it on her knees and stroked the rusty blade inch by inch. She turned it over and over to confirm that it was the same sword she had gotten when she was in Yang. After Yushu's excitement had passed, she sank into her memories. This sword had originally been in the hands of a Taoist. This person had captured a group of young boys and girls, intending to extract their blood to sharpen the edge of the ancient sword. In the end, he had fallen into the hands of Jing Qin, who had seen injustice. After that, she stole the sword and kept it for herself. Until today, she didn't expect that the broken sword she picked up was the famous Chunjun sword, one of the 6 founding weapons. Thinking about it carefully, when she and Qing Zheng met for the first time in the Ji family's Jingshang Hall, his attitude towards her was worth pondering. At first, he asked her all kinds of questions as if he was confirming whether she was the person he was looking for. She couldn't remember what she answered wrongly, so he lost interest in her and didn't mention taking her as his apprentice. After a few days, he asked her to be his apprentice. At first she refused. Then she and Yu Xiaoxia were caught by the evil Taoist. Yushu bent her fingers and knocked her head. She remembered another detail. When she secretly took the sword back to the Ji family and hid it, she happened to be seen by the elusive Qing Zheng. At that time he saw the sword in her hand with his own eyes. These 2 things used to be completely unrelated, but now they seemed to be closely related. Qing Zheng's master was Prince Yuan Zheng. 100 years ago, he stole the Chunjun sword from the imperial mausoleum. Later he left a fake sword to the Dragon Tiger Mountain Taoist sect. The real sword was still in his hands. 20 years ago, he asked Yunhua to go to the capital to find the Book of Mystery Fairy. For some reason, she did not hand over the Chunjun sword to him. As a result, Yunhua succeeded in stealing the Book of Mystic Fairy, but his whereabouts were unknown. Coincidentally, the 100-year period was up. The Great and Calamity entered the world, and the Fate Breaker appeared. Qing Zheng set his sights on the Fate Breaker. He had probably calculated that the person who would destroy his life was in the Ji family in Yang City. That was why he was waiting there. She could finally confirm that when Qing Zheng decided to accept her as his disciple, he must have confirmed that she was a fate breaker. Therefore, she did not obtain this sword by chance at all. It was arranged by Qing Zheng. The eldest disciple disappeared after stealing the Book of Mystic Fairy's 6 wrens. The 7-star suns on him were unpredictable to Qing Zheng, so he accepted her as his second disciple, who was bound to have something to do with the Book of Mystic Fairy's 6 wrens. Moreover, he secretly handed the Chunjun sword to her and accompanied her step by step to get closer to the truth. She had once given this sword to Jing Qin, but after many twists and turns, it still returned to her. If she had known from the beginning that this sword was the Chunjun sword and that she was the fate breaker, then she would not have followed Qing Zheng's script. But now she was in deep trouble. She could not help it. She held the Chunjun sword in her hand. It was impossible for her to hand it over to anyone. She could not even trust Yunhua. If this continued in the future, she would either snatch the Book of Mystic Fairy's 6 wrens from Yunhua's hands, or Yunhua would snatch the Chunjun sword from her. And the purpose of the 2 of them was completely opposite. One wanted to destroy the Book of Mystic Fairy's 6 wrens, and the other wanted to keep the Book of Mystic Fairy's 6 wrens. Yushu closed her eyes and muttered to herself, "Master, is all of this within your calculations? Why did you arrange it like this?" She really wanted to dig 3 feet into the ground to find Qing Zheng and ask him in person, "If you wanted to destroy the book, why didn't you hand over the Chunjun sword to my senior brother but gave it to me later?" Yushu hid the Chunjun sword tightly. Fortunately, only a few people had seen this sword and no one would associate it with the 6 tools of the founding dynasty. Even De Dian did not know what the real Chunjun sword looked like. The only record was in the Xian family's Qiao Zhen, and it was a secret. Just after she received such a surprise, a shocking thunder fell from the capital. An urgent report was sent to the palace. Jiang Huaying proclaimed himself as the emperor of Ningdong City, wearing a yellow robe, separated the 5 counties in the northeast of An dynasty, and established the country as the Great Yan. In the 300 years since the founding of Da'en, it was the first time that a foreign minister proclaimed himself as the emperor. It could be said to be unprecedented. Emperor Chongzhen was shocked and angry. He swept away his previous idea of waiting at ease and immediately summoned all the ministers to the palace for a discussion. He appointed the general of Xianwu Feng Shao as the grand marshal to suppress the rebellion, and the left commander of the Yulin Royal Guards Yin Yuanrong as the vanguard general. He mobilized the troops and led 100,000 troops to the northeast to recover the lost land and fight against the rebel Jiang Huaying. A skinny camel was still bigger than a horse. Moreover, the former emperor did not like to be extravagant. The Daran treasury that Emperor Chongzhen inherited was full, and together with the food stored in various places every year, it could provide for 100,000 troops for a whole year. There were voices of opposition in the court when the emperor launched a large-scale campaign to suppress the rebellion. Some people stood up to dissuade him, but they were banished from the court by the furious Emperor Chongzhen. Yu Shu watched the fire from the other side and did not rush into the muzzle. 3 days later, Feng Xiao, Yin Yuanrong and a group of soldiers left the capital. At this critical juncture, Zhu Muzhao resigned. Emperor Chongzhen was angry, but he symbolically persuaded him to stay and allowed him to resign. For a moment, the Celestial Commissioner was like a group of dragons without a leader. All the civil and military officials watched from the side, guessing who would have the last laugh, Junior Supervisor Ren or Chao Zuoling, but they did not expect an unexpected winner to emerge. When the imperial edict was delivered to the Celestial Commissioner, close to 100 officials from the 3 departments and 2 bureaus rushed to the bell tower to listen to the edict. It was a mess. Zhu Muzhao came with the chief eunuch Bingli, who was in charge of announcing the edict. Although he had changed into casual clothes, he still looked dignified, and the scene quickly quieted down. Everyone stood in their positions according to their rank, and knelt down to listen to the edict. Ren Qiming and Chao Ku were at the front, Yu Shu was a step behind them, and then Xianya, Cui Shui and the others. The chief eunuch Bingli opened the silk book in his hand, which was embroidered with cloud patterns. He raised his eyebrows and read in a sharp voice, "In the name of the emperor, the imperial edict states, the Celestial Commissioner has been passed down for more than 300 years, and has carried on the will of the Empress Ningzhen, the virtuous and the virtuous to protect the country. Today the former emperor will appoint Miaoling maid envoy Yu Shu as the 11th generation of the Celestial Commissioner. I hope that you will be a role model for the Yi family." As soon as the words were spoken, it was like the sound of a pin drop. Only one person stood up without any change in expression, walked past the crowd and received the imperial edict with both hands. She raised it high above her head, covering the bewitching cinnabar between her eyebrows, and said in a clear voice, "Your subject Yu Shu accepts the edict, and thanks your majesty for his grace." As soon as she finished, she faced the direction of the palace, knelt down again and kowtowed 3 times in a row. Then she straightened her back and looked back at Zhu Muzhao, who looked relieved, and turned around to face the people of the Celestial Commissioner. She did not care if they were convinced or not, and who was happy and who was sad. She looked at the crowd coldly, held up the imperial edict with one hand and exhaled. "From today onwards, all of you shall listen to my orders." The crowd was silent for a few breaths. Ren Qiming was the first to bow, followed by Xianya, Cui Shui, and the people of the Kunling Bureau. Finally, Chao Zuoling had no choice but to follow the crowd and lower his head. Nearly 100 people bowed to the ground and responded with a buzzing sound. "Greetings to the Grand Secretary." Yu Shu narrowed her eyes slightly, feeling indescribably carefree. She looked up at the red sun that was slowly rising in the sky, and her chest was filled with pride. She soared up to the clouds and went straight to the sky. The news of Yu Shu taking over as the Grand Secretary seemed to have grown wings, and within a day, it spread throughout the imperial court. The nearby Taisher Shuyuan was the first to hear the news. Many people thought it was a joke and shook their heads in disbelief. However, one spread to 10 and 10 to 100, but no one stood up to dispel the rumor, so they had no choice but to believe it. That afternoon the 18 academicians gathered at Rong Xingtang at the same time. They were all here for this news. As soon as they entered the door, they heard them talking all at once. "I heard that this morning, the palace sent a decree to the Celestial Commissioner to let Yu Lianfang take over as the Grand Secretary. I thought it was a joke, but I sent someone to the Celestial Commissioner to inquire, and it turned out to be true." Silly. She's a young woman, how can she take on such a heavy responsibility? Isn't this a joke? The Celestial Commissioner and his group actually accepted it? Did no one object? What did Junior Supervisor Rin say? At that time, Grand Secretary Zhu was also there. It looked like it was his idea. Who dared to object? Among the crowd, only 3 people did not interrupt. One was Yu Shu's master Fang Zijing, the other was Yu Shu's master astrology Sima Kuei, and the last one was Madame Lu, who had heard the news long ago. Seeing that they were getting more and more outrageous, almost openly complaining that the emperor was muddle-headed, Fang Zijing coughed heavily, which attracted the attention of the crowd. He sneered and said, "After listening to you all talk for a long time, no one can say why Yu Shu is not qualified for the position of Grand Secretary. Academician Han, you were the loudest just now. Tell me, where is she lacking?" Han Wenguang frowned and said with a face full of displeasure, "Elder Fong, I know that Yu Lianfang is your favorite student. You see, of course she is good in every aspect, but at that time, someone took advantage of his seniority and bullied the little girl without anyone to rely on. In the end, he was slapped in the face and has been holding a grudge ever since." "Don't you think so?" Fang Zijing interrupted him and rudely exposed his little thoughts. Han Wenguang was speechless. He pointed at him and could not say anything. "Elder Fang's words are wrong," someone chimed in. It was Academician Qi, who had once rejected Yu Shu's offer. "As teachers, how can we bicker with a little girl? Right now we are only discussing the matter as it stands. We are only saying that she is not suitable for the position of Grand Secretary. Why do you have to deliberately misinterpret Academician Han?" Immediately a group of people echoed. "Ha!" Madame Lu laughed and suddenly interrupted. "With all due respect, the little girl you are talking about is now the Grand Secretary of the Celestial Commissioner. I don't know when the Taisher Library will be able to control the Celestial Commissioner and criticize the Grand Secretary who is below one and above tens of thousands of people." Finished speaking, she pursed her lips and smiled again. She stood up and said, "I absolutely do not dare to criticize the Grand Secretary. Old gentleman, please do your best. This time I want to have a good mouth, but later don't slap your own face. Ayaya, I am a straightforward person. I won't say any more, I'm leaving." Madame Lu rolled up her long sleeves and slowly left her seat. To be continued. Chapter 803. Yu Shu moved into the Taishi building. This was the official residence of the previous Grand Supervisor. It was located in the north of the Celestial Commissioner's 9 palaces. It was located in the east. The independent courtyard was surrounded by a bamboo forest. The environment was quiet and beautiful. There was a pool of running water in the garden. The building was located in the middle of the lake. Only a 9-turn bridge could reach the other side. After Zhu Muzhao stepped down from his position, he moved all of his personal belongings out of the building. Yu Shu walked into the slightly empty hall and looked around the place with a different mood than before. Her gaze fell on the treasured chair in the middle of the carved railings and jade steps. For the past 15 years, Zhu Muzhao had sat in that position and issued orders, looking down on all the civil and military officials of the court. He was truly below one and above tens of thousands. She had just received the imperial edict yesterday and the secretariat was rushing to make her court clothes and official robes. At this time she was still wearing the third-rank Right Commander's silver gauze gown with the Big Dipper Palace embroidered on her shoulder. Originally, the patch for female officials had another design. This third-rank Right Commander was supposed to be an orchid in an empty valley. However, the secretariat was in a hurry and used the wrong design. She did not correct it because she already knew at that time that in the near future, she would sit in this position and wear the pattern that only stayed on Empress Ningxin's shoulder for the past 300 years, the flower of the other shore. The flower of the other shore was also known as the red spider lily. It came from Sanskrit and was not a spiritual plant that appeared in the Taoist classics. There was a saying, "The flower of the other shore blooms on the other shore. Only the flower and not the leaves can be seen." It meant that the red spider lily bloomed on the banks of the river of forgetfulness in the underworld. It implied reincarnation and rebirth. However, it was a symbol chosen by Empress Ningxin herself. It represented the woman who stood at the highest position in the court. Yu Shu walked around Taishi Tower and was very satisfied with her new territory. She tried the chair, but it was hard and uncomfortable to sit on. Just as she was thinking of bringing a soft cushion over tomorrow, the guard outside reported that someone from the registrar's office had arrived. Xayanya came in with a writing official. When she saw Yu Shu sitting on the throne, her eyes twinkled. She greeted her with a smile and explained the purpose of her visit. "Grand Secretary, you will be staying here for a long time in the future. You must not feel uncomfortable living here. Take a look at what is lacking in this building and what needs to be added. Mention it so that this lowly official can remember it and redecorate it as soon as possible." The comptroller's office was in charge of property. Just the amount of tax collected from the great exchange hall across the country was already an astronomical figure. It could be said that they were extremely rich. Xanyo was indeed a shrewd person and knew how to adapt to the circumstances. Yu Shu had just taken up the position and it was still unclear how capable he was. A group of people were watching quietly from below, but he was the first to take the initiative to please her. Yu Shu smiled faintly and said, This place is a little deserted, I don't like it, you clean it up. Finished speaking, she no longer cared about him and picked up the dossier that Zhong Jingxi had sent yesterday and flipped through it. She did not treat Xania as an elder just because of her relationship with Xan Lu. Sitting here, she only needed to remember that Xania was the Celestial Commissioner. Xania agreed readily. After asking for her permission, he wandered around the hall and went up to the second floor to have a look. From time to time he stopped to let his attendants record, "The color of the curtain is too dark. Change it to 8 pieces of lake blue brocade and 8 pieces of purple silk. Change all the screens here as well and use glass shelves. Note it down. Add 6 more mahogany lanterns with cranes on a tortoise's back, 2 black beast head incense burners, a pair of celestial glazed amphorae. It's going to be winter soon. 4 sets of bedding and pillows. Don't forget to write down the armrests of the chairs." He ran back and forth, almost changing the furnishings inside and outside of Taishi Brothel from inside out. Only then did he leave with his entourage satisfied. Not long after he left, Junior Eunuch Ren brought a few officials from the Zhong Jingxi to pay a visit. Yu Shu was now the chief of the Zhong Jingxi, so Ren Qiming naturally became her assistant. He was a talent that Zhu Muzhao had personally trained. He was pragmatic, capable and loyal. Originally he was the most promising person to inherit Zhu Muzhao's mantle, but unfortunately she appeared out of nowhere. Not to mention that there was still some hostility between Ren Qiming and Yu Shu. Earlier he had lynched her and broken her little finger. In addition, his wife, Madame Ren Rue, had talked about her behind her back. Although they were not enemies, they still had a grudge. Yu Shu had long understood the power of the Zhong Jingxi. It could be said that the power of the Celestial Commissioner was concentrated in this department. The big ones included presiding over the royal sacrifice, writing the genealogy of the emperor, managing the register of the clan, and rewarding and punishing members of the royal family. The small ones included recording the children of the royal family, inheriting the title of nobility, drawing up titles and so on. Take Ning Wang for example. When he was the regent, it was his most glorious time. Kong Qi had accused him of murdering the 10th princess. At that time, the former emperor was recuperating in Huajin Garden and did not care about court affairs. The Supreme Court did not dare to accept this case, so the Zhong Jingxi dared to take it. If they said that Ning Wang was guilty, then he was guilty. If they said that Ning Wang was imprisoned, then he was imprisoned. There was no ambiguity at all. Ren Qiming brought people to report the recent affairs of the Zhong Jingxi to Yu Shu. He was very methodical and well-behaved. Yu Shu could see that he was not convinced that she was in this position. But because this was Zhu Muzhao's decision, he would obey. So after they finished discussing official matters, she asked him to stay and let the others leave. What other instructions does the Zhong Jingxi have? Ren Qiming did not respectfully address her as Tai Shu. In his eyes, she was not worthy of this title. Yu Shu raised an eyebrow and smiled. She turned her body to change into a comfortable sitting position. One hand propped up her chin, the other rested on the white jade table. Her slender and long fingers nimbly tapped on the table. She examined him for a moment and asked unhurriedly, "Junior Supervisor Ren, how long have you been in the Celestial Commissioner?" Ren Qiming lowered his head and said, "This lowly official became an official in the 3rd year of Zhaoqing." 12 years, Yu Shu sighed. Counting it, this seat is only a fraction of your time. She had become the Celestial Commissioner in July of the previous year. It had not even been a year and 3 months. Ren Qiming said with a wooden face, "Then you really have a meteoric rise and your official career is prosperous." This was not a compliment. Yu Shu chuckled and asked indifferently, "Then do you know why I am in this position?" Ren Qiming heard this and raised his head to look at her. His mind turned quickly and he said, "This lowly official does not dare to criticize." Yu Shu stopped smiling and looked at him coldly. "You do not dare to criticize, but it does not mean that there is no criticism. I think you are clear that because I am the person who broke Ming, Zhu Gongzi looked at me differently and let me take over as the Celestial Commissioner. It is precisely because I am the only one who can hope to find the Book of Mystery Maiden Lu Ren and protect the foundation of Dan. Since you are clear about this, you should also know that other than me, no one else can sit firmly in this position. I do not care what you think in your heart. I will only warn you once and give you this one chance. Either you win my trust or I will find someone to replace you." The meaning behind her words was actually telling him, either submit to me or get lost. Ren Qiming's body froze and he clenched his teeth. At first he felt ashamed and resentful, but when he met her overbearing eyes, he quickly calmed down. He was already middle-aged and had long passed the age of letting his emotions affect his decisions. If it was 10 years ago and he heard someone speak to him like this, he would definitely turn around and leave. But now, he repeatedly chewed over her cold words and his back gradually became wet with sweat. No one knew better than him how much power Yu Shu, this young woman, had in her hands. Not mentioning her reputation and ability, the previous generation's great advisor Zhu Muzhao had transferred the command of the blackguards to her hands. She was also the only person in the world other than Zhu Muzhao who had learned the supreme bone divine lesson. Emperor Chongzhen favored her greatly and the current empress also had a close relationship with her. Just as she said, other than her, no one else could be qualified for the position of great advisor. From this, it could be seen that her threat to find someone to replace him was not just empty words. However, he knew too many secrets of the court, each one enough to be fatal. If he left like this, the Celestial Commissioner would not let him go, and the Emperor would not let him go. In the end, it would be better than having an intact corpse. Ren Qiming had been depressed and dissatisfied for several months. At this moment he suddenly thought it through. He had no other choice. He could either live or seek death. So this lowly official was muddle-headed. He looked deeply at Yu Shu. His tightly clenched fist slowly loosened. Lifting the hem of his robe, he knelt on the ground and said in a respectful voice, "Grand Secretary, please forgive my crime of disrespect." Yu Shu raised the corner of her mouth in satisfaction. She nodded and said, "A wise man submits to circumstances. Get up, Junior Supervisor. In the future this seat will need to rely on you for many things. Don't be muddle-headed again." She herself was a tough nut to crack. It was naturally easy for her to deal with this kind of person who was unmoved by force or persuasion. Everything about being courteous and approachable were all nonsense. Only by letting him see the reality would he obediently listen to her orders. Ren Qiming finally gave in front of her. Then he reported an interesting matter to her. "Last night, a few academicians from Taisher Library came to my fu to seek an audience. After meeting they beat around the bush. Listening to their intentions, they were dissatisfied with you taking over the position of Celestial Commissioner. They deliberately stirred up trouble and urged me to fight for power with you." When Yu Shu asked him who they were, he mentioned them one by one. When she heard Han Wenguang's name, she couldn't help but laugh mockingly. Her eyes flashed and she thought, "When I first took office, it was inevitable that people's hearts were not stable. Just as I was about to punish the chicken to warn the monkey, there were people who were seeking their own deaths who came to the door." Ren Qiming was also tactful. This stab in the back was very straightforward. He not only cut off his relationship but also surrendered to her. Yu Shu then asked him, "How do you think this matter should be handled?" Ren Qiming said sternly, "In this lowly official's view, the academicians' days are too leisurely. That's why they are impetuous and have ideas that they shouldn't have. If they are not punished, I'm afraid that they will be even more rampant in the future." Junior Supervisor is right, Yu Shu thought and sat up straight. She took a brush from the brush rack. Seeing this, Ren Qiming hesitated for a moment and then went forward to grind the ink for her. Yu Shu shook the brush and muttered, "I studied at Taisher Library for several months and found many bad practices. For example, some academicians were too arrogant and rejected the students who were studying hard. There were also some academicians who took advantage of their position to seek personal gain and did not focus on teaching. All these things are because the 18 academicians do things their own way. There is one less person to take charge of the overall situation, and the Celestial Commissioner is too indulgent. This has led to today. Why don't we choose a director from among them and send a supervisor from the Celestial Commissioner to supervise the Taisher Library to correct its conduct?" Chapter 804. Add more chapters. Look carefully, there's still one more chapter. Yes, I missed the plot. Jiang Huaying had his own army and Yin Kingdom was added to the north of An dynasty. The common people were not affected for the time being, but the atmosphere in the court was a little tense. Emperor Chongzhen kept a straight face all day long and all the officials were trembling. Everything else went on as planned. It was the calm before the storm. The most eye-catching thing at the moment was the selection of the harem. Before the local beauties were sent to the capital, the officials in the capital had already taken action. In less than half a month, there were more than 100 beauties registered on the list of Kunling Bureau's beauties. On the third day after Yu Shu took charge of the Taichu, she transferred Madame Lu from the Taichu Library and restored her position. She was also appointed as the right commander of the Kunling Bureau. Situ Qinglan, as her aide-de-camp, listened to Madame Lu's orders and monitored her every move for Yu Shu. So the list of the first batch of beauties sent to the palace for the selection was just released and it was sent to Yu Shu's desk. Yushu just glanced at it and asked someone to make a copy and send it to Empress Jiang. She didn't interfere with these chores. One day she called Wen Xiao and asked him if he would like to be a supervisor in Taisha Library. His official position was still the same as the 6th rank. At first glance, it seemed that he was no longer a celestial commissioner, but he had more real power than he did in Kunling Bureau. He was demoted on the surface but promoted on the surface. Yushu told him seriously, "Right now there are many people in the 3 departments and 2 bureaus who don't like me. I will clean them up in the future. You are going to Taisha Library this time to supervise the dean and clean up the unhealthy practices. Secondly, help me find talents and train some useful people. You can wait for a year and a half and then I will promote you to Taiching Bureau. I will keep the position of Shaoqing for you." Taiching Bureau was in charge of the examination and audit of officials. The chief officer was Chao Zuoling and the adjutant was Shaoqing. Shui Yun once took this position and made a lot of trouble for Yushu. She almost couldn't pass the examination. Yushu thinks that when Shaoan is calm and has the demeanor of Ren Qiming, the key is that he is loyal to her. With a little experience he can be entrusted with important tasks. When Xiao and readily agreed to her arrangement. He returned to Kunling Bureau to pack his things and went to Taisha Library the next day to take up his post. Just as Yushu was taking over the Celestial Commissioner in an orderly manner, bad news came from the blackguard. Zhu Muzhao suddenly fell ill overnight and his life was in danger. When she heard the news, she rushed to the Zhu family without stopping. The Zhu family was known as the head of the 12 families in the capital because they had produced a total of 4 great instructors. Zhu Muzhao had very few brothers and sisters to begin with. In his generation he only had Zhu Qingjue to carry on the family line. Hearing that Zhu Muzhao was seriously ill, the first to arrive was the Marquis of Rong N Yin Tianho, who had also retired. As the prime minister of 2 dynasties, Yin Tianho's position was extremely high. In the end he retired after achieving success. He could be called a role model for all officials in the world. Few people knew that he and Zhu Muzhao were more than 10 years apart. When they were officials in the court they often disagreed with each other on politics. In fact, they were a pair of friends who appreciated each other despite the difference in age. Yin Tianho sat on the chair beside the bed and looked at his dying friend with red eyes. He said with tears, "Tianwen, what's wrong with you? Even Aju can't see what's wrong with you. You can't even live if you say you can't. I'm still waiting for you to retire and go sightseeing with me. Don't lie to me. What's wrong with you that you have to wait for death?" Zhu Muzhao opened his eyes weakly and squeezed out a smile. He said faintly, "I just feel too tired and want to rest." "Don't cry. You're already so old. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at?" Yin Tianho usually studied the art of Qi Huang. He felt his pulse and saw that it was very shallow. He also saw that his eyes were empty. He knew that Zhu Muzhao really couldn't live. He wiped his tears and held back his sadness. He said, "What do you want to tell me? Just say it." Zhu Muzhao said, "Old brother, go. Don't bring more trouble to yourself. Listen to my advice. Take advantage of these 2 years to find a quiet place to live. Don't stay in the capital. If you can avoid this disaster you can live to 100 years old. You'll have a house full of children and grandchildren." Yin Tianho nodded with tears in his eyes. He said, "I'll listen to you. I'll leave when you're done." While he was grieving, Zhu Qingjue came in with Yushu. When Yushu saw the bedridden and sickly Zhu Muzhao, she was shocked. Half a month ago, when Zhu Muzhao accompanied the imperial edict to the Directorate of Astrology to announce her succession, he was still in good health and didn't show any signs of illness. How could he be so sick in just half a month? She stopped walking and pulled Zhu Qingjue back to the door. She asked him in a low voice, "What illness did Master Zhu have? Why is he in such a critical condition?" Zhu Qingjue's eyes were full of pain. He shook his head in confusion. He said in a weak voice, "I can't diagnose." Yushu looked at his unkempt beard and black and blue eyes. She knew he couldn't do anything and did not ask further. At this time Yin Tianho's voice came from inside the room. "Aju, your father is calling for you. Come in." Zhu Qingjue and Yushu quickly entered the room. Yin Tianho moved to the side. Zhu Muzhao struggled to raise his hand. Zhu Qingjue quickly knelt beside the bed and held his hand. He moved closer and said, "Father, please bear with it. The medicine is almost ready. Drink it and sleep. If there's anything you want to say, wait until you wake up." Zhu Muzhao gently shook his head. He raised his eyes and looked at Yushu. He tried to see her face clearly. He opened his mouth and said, "Lotus Room, come here. I have a request." Yushu obediently walked to the bedside. Yin Tianho saw this and knew that he was making arrangements for his funeral. He wiped the corner of his eyes and silently left. Please say it. I'm listening. At this moment, her feelings were extremely complicated. Since the man before her was the enemy that killed Shuirui's father, and she owed him a debt of gratitude, it was difficult to say if she wanted him to live well or if she didn't want him to die like this. She thought he was going to ask her to find the Book of Fairy Maiden and protect the Celestial Commissioner. She didn't expect that he would ask her to do something else in the end. After I die, there will be no one to support the Zhu family. I only have one son, Qingjue. I'm afraid that he can't keep the family business. Can you help me take care of him? The implication was that he wanted to matchmake her and Zhu Qingjue. Yushu thought she heard wrong. Zhu Qingjue also shouted in disbelief, "Father?" Zhu Muzhao ignored him and continued to look at Yushu. He was indeed making a request and not threatening her. After a short moment of surprise, Yushu shook her head and refused him. "I'm sorry, I can't promise you." Zhu Muzhao did not give up and said, "This son of mine can be considered a man of striking appearance. Although he lacks a bit of ambition, he is honest and upright and very kind. If you agree to marry him, the Zhu family business will be handed over to you as a betrothal gift." As the head of the 12 prefectures, Zhu Muzhao's family business had reached a level that Yushu couldn't imagine. But he knew that without him, Zhu Qingjue wouldn't be able to keep this kind of wealth. In the end, it would either fall into the hands of others or it would be a loss of both people and wealth. Who would have thought that Yushu still shook her head and promised him, "Don't worry, even if I don't have a good relationship with Zhu Shixiang, in the future I will definitely protect the Zhu family, until the day I can no longer protect it." Although Zhu Muzhao was disappointed, he did not force her. After confirming that her promise was true, he was so tired that he closed his eyes. He felt that his consciousness was gradually blurring, and his voice became unclear. Zhu Qingjue held his hand tightly and moved closer to him. Only then did she hear what he was saying. "Father, the Celestial Commissioner didn't die in my hands. I protected it." Zhu Muzhao had been in power for more than 10 years. When he was dying, the person he couldn't let go of the most was his only son, Zhu Qingjue. What he couldn't forget was the oath he made to his late father. Zhu Qingjue knelt by the bed and sobbed. Yushu reached out her hand to check Zhu Muzhao's breath. Her face was sad. A powerful minister of a generation passed away peacefully just like that. The sharp sword hanging over Yushu's head finally disappeared. But the first thing she felt was not relief or happiness but sadness. She couldn't tell why. "Zhu Shixiang, don't be sad." She patted Zhu Qingjue's shoulder and turned to go outside to announce the death. Marquis Rong, and was old. He cried so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. In the end he was supported by Yin Yuanrong. The Celestial Commissioner and other officials came one after another. Ren Qiming took the lead and knelt in the courtyard for a long time, crying non-stop. Yushu didn't criticize them. She quietly helped Zhu Qingjue take care of Zhu Muzhao's funeral. It was obvious that she wanted to take this opportunity to show that she was close to the Zhu family and dispel some people's greed. That night, Yushu hurriedly brought Zhu Muzhao's obituary to the palace to see the emperor. Emperor Chongzhen looked very sad. After listening to her recount of Zhu Muzhao's life, he immediately issued an imperial edict. He was conferred the title of Count Shunchang, which would be inherited for 3 generations. This was the last benefit Yushu could get for the Zhu family. The emperor was not a nostalgic person. After a while, it would be difficult for him to remember the benefits of Zhu Muzhao. Late at night, Yushu hurried back to the Zhu family with the fresh imperial edict. The deceased was conferred the title of Count Shunchang. Zhu Qingjue inherited the title of Count Shunchang at a young age, but he didn't feel the slightest joy. Only those relatives who needed to rely on the power of the Zhu family were happy. In this way, Yushu left early in the morning and returned late at night. She stayed in the Zhu family for 7 days. In accordance with Zhu Muzhao's last wish, the coffin was put into the coffin after 7 days. She and Marquis Rong'en, one on the left and the other on the right, carried the coffin. They walked for 10 li, which later became a story. After the funeral, Yushu returned to the Celestial Commissioner. She clearly felt that the respect of the officials below her was not superficial, but more sincere. Thinking about it, she knew that it was because she had kept vigil for Zhu Muzhao and unexpectedly gained some loyalty. After another 3 days, Zhu Qingjue suddenly came to visit with an unexpected person. "This is Gu Hong," Zhu Qingjue introduced him to her. "I don't know where my father found this servant. After my father died, he kept pestering me, annoying me. Gu Hong's martial arts are excellent, so I thought he would be useful to you. I sent him to you so you can take him in." Chapter 805. Yushu moved into the Taishi building. This was the official residence of the Great Supervisor of the Celestial Commissioner's 9 palaces. It occupied the Kan position, and the imperial household faced the east. The independent courtyard was surrounded by a bamboo forest, and the environment was quiet. There was a pool of running water in the garden, and the building was located in the middle of the lake. Only a 9-turn bridge could reach the other side. After Zhu Muzhao stepped down from his position, he moved all of his personal belongings out of the building. Yushidu walked into the slightly empty hall and looked around the place with a different mood than before. Her gaze fell on the treasured chair in the middle of the carved railings and jade steps. For the past 15 years, Zhu Muzhao had sat in that position and issued orders, looking down on all the civil and military officials of the court. He was truly below one and above tens of thousands. She had just received the imperial edict yesterday, and the secretariat was rushing to make her court dress and official robes. At this time she was still wearing the third-rank Right Commander's silver gauze gown, with the Big Dipper Palace embroidered on her shoulder. Originally, there was another pattern on the patch for female officials. This third-rank Right Commander should be the orchid in the empty valley, but the secretariat was in a hurry and used the wrong pattern. She did not correct it because she already knew at that time that in the near future, she would sit in this position and wear the pattern that only stayed on Empress Ningxuan's shoulder for the past 300 years, the flower of the other shore. The flower of the other shore, also known as the red spider lily, was taken from Sanskrit. It was not a spiritual plant that appeared in the Taoist classics. There was a saying, the flower of the other shore blooms on the other shore. One can only see the flower, not the leaves. It meant that the red spider lily bloomed by the river of forgetfulness in the underworld, and it implied reincarnation and rebirth. However, it was a symbol chosen by Empress Ningxuan herself, and it represented the woman who stood at the highest position in the court. Xayanya came in with a writing official. When she saw Yushu sitting on the throne, her eyes twinkled slightly. She smiled and came forward to greet her, and then explained the purpose of her visit. In the future you will be staying here for a long time. You must not feel uncomfortable. Please take a look at what is lacking in this building and what needs to be added. Mention it so that I can remember it and redecorate it as soon as possible. The comptroller's office was in charge of property. Just the amount of tax collected from the great exchange hall across the country was already an astronomical figure. It could be said that they were extremely rich. Xayanya was indeed a shrewd person and knew how to adapt to the circumstances. Yushu had just taken up the position and it was still unclear how capable he was. A group of people were watching quietly from below, but he was the first to take the initiative to please her. Yushu smiled faintly and said, "This place is a little deserted, I don't like it, you clean it up." Finished speaking, she no longer cared about him and picked up the dossier that Zhong Zhengxi had sent yesterday and flipped through it. She did not treat Xayanya as an elder just because of her relationship with Xanlu. Sitting here, she only needed to remember that Xayanya was the Celestial Commissioner. Replace all the screens here as well. Use glass shelves. Note it down. Add 6 more mahogany lanterns with cranes on a turtle's back, 2 black beast-head incense burners, a pair of celestial glazed fish amphorae. It's going to be winter soon. 4 sets of bedding, soft pillows, and don't forget to write down the armrests of the chairs. He ran back and forth, almost changing the inside and outside of Taishi brothel from inside out. Only then did he leave with his people satisfied. Not long after he left, Junior Eunuch Ren brought a few officials from the comptroller's office to pay a visit. Now that Yushu was the chief of the comptroller's office, Ren Qiming naturally became her assistant. He was a talent trained by Zhu Muzhao. He was pragmatic, capable, and loyal. Originally, he was the most promising person to inherit Zhu Muzhao's mantle, but unfortunately she came out of nowhere. Not to mention that there was still some animosity between Ren Qiming and Yushu. Previously, he had lynched her and twisted off one of her little fingers. In addition, his wife, Ren Rueshi, had gossiped about her behind her back. Although it couldn't be considered a grudge, it was still a grudge. Yushu had long understood the authority of the comptroller's office. It could be said that the power of the Celestial Commissioner was concentrated in this department. The big ones included presiding over the imperial sacrifice, writing the genealogy of the emperor, managing the register of the clan, and rewarding and punishing members of the imperial clan. The small ones included recording the children of the imperial clan, inheriting the title of nobility, drawing up titles, and so on. Taking Ning Wang as an example, when he was supervising the country, it was his most glorious time. Kong Qi had accused him of murdering the 10th princess. At that time, the previous emperor was recuperating in Huajin Garden and didn't care about court affairs. The Supreme Court didn't dare to take this case, so the comptroller dared to take it all on his own. If they said that Ning Wang was guilty, then he was guilty. If they said that he was imprisoned, then he was imprisoned. There was no ambiguity at all. Ren Qiming brought people to report the recent affairs of the comptroller to Yu Shu. He was very methodical and well-behaved. Yu Shu could see that he wasn't satisfied with her sitting in this position. But because this was Zhu Muzhao's decision, he would obey. So after they finished discussing official matters, she left him behind and let the others leave. What other instructions does the comptroller have? Ren Qiming didn't respectfully call her Tai. In his eyes, she wasn't worthy of this title. Yu Shu raised an eyebrow and smiled. She turned her body to change into a comfortable sitting position. One hand propped up her chin, the other rested on the white jade table. Her slender and long fingers nimbly tapped on the table. She examined him for a moment and asked unhurriedly, "Junior Supervisor Ren, how many years have you been in the Celestial Commissioner?" Ren Qiming lowered his head and said, "This lowly official became an official in the 3rd year of Zhaoqing." 12 years, Yu Shu sighed. Counting it, this seat is only a fraction of your time. She had become the Celestial Commissioner in July of last year. It hadn't even been a year and 3 months since then. Ren Qiming said with a wooden face, "Then you really have a meteoric rise and your career is prosperous." This wasn't a compliment. Yu Shu chuckled and asked in a careless tone, "Then do you know how I got this position?" Ren Qiming heard this and raised his head to look at her. His thoughts turned quickly and he said, "This lowly official doesn't dare to criticize." Yu Shu stopped smiling and looked at him coldly. She said, "You don't dare to criticize, but it doesn't mean you don't have criticism. I think you are clear that it's because I'm the person who broke Ming that Zhu Gong saw me differently and let me take over as the Celestial Commissioner. It's because I'm the only one who has the hope to find the mystic maiden Lu Ren and protect the foundation of Da'an. Since you are clear about this, then you should know that other than me, no one else can sit firmly in this position. I don't care what you think in your heart. I'm only warning you once and giving you this one chance. Either you win my trust or I'll find someone to replace you." The meaning behind her words was, either you obey me or get lost. Ren Qiming's body stiffened and he clenched his teeth. He first felt ashamed and angry, but he calmed down when faced with her overbearing attitude. He was already middle-aged and had long passed the age of letting his emotions affect his decisions. If it was 10 years ago hearing someone speak to him like this, he would definitely turn around and leave. But now, he repeatedly thought over her cold words and his back was gradually drenched in sweat. No one knew better than him how much power this young woman, Yu Shu, had in her hands. Not mentioning her reputation and ability, the previous generation's great advisor Zhu Muzhao had handed over the command of the blackguard to her. She was also the only person other than Zhu Muzhao who had learned the supreme bone deity lesson. Emperor Chongzhen favored her greatly and the current empress also had a close relationship with her. Just as she said, other than her, no one else could be qualified for the position of great advisor. From this, it could be seen that her threat to find someone to replace him was not just empty words. However, he knew too many secrets of the imperial court and every one of them was enough to be fatal. If he left the Celestial Commissioner like this, she would not let him go and the emperor would not let him go. In the end, he would only be left with an intact corpse. Ren Qiming had been depressed and dissatisfied for a few months. At this moment he suddenly thought it through. He had no other choice. He could either live or seek death. So this lowly official was confused. He looked deeply at Yu Shu, his tightly clenched fists slowly loosening. Lifting the hem of his robe, he knelt on the ground and said respectfully, "Please forgive my sin of disrespect." The corners of Yu Shu's mouth curled up in satisfaction. She nodded and said, "A wise man submits to circumstances. Get up, Junior Supervisor. In the future, I will need to rely on you for many things. Don't be foolish again." She herself was a tough nut to crack. It was naturally easy for her to deal with this kind of person who was unmoved by force or persuasion. Everything about being courteous and approachable were all nonsense. Only by letting him see the reality would he obediently listen to her orders. Only then did Ren Qiming admit defeat in front of her. Then he reported an interesting matter to her. "Last night, a few scholars from the Grand Historian Yuan came to my residence to ask for an audience. After meeting they beat around the bush. Listening to their intentions, they were dissatisfied with you taking over the position of Celestial Commissioner. They deliberately stirred up trouble and urged me to fight for power with you." Yu Shu asked him who they were and he mentioned them one by one. When she heard Han Wenguang's name, she couldn't help but sneer. Her eyes flashed and she thought, at the beginning of her tenure, it was inevitable that people would be unstable. Just as she was about to punish the chicken to warn the monkey, there were people who were seeking death who came to her door. Ren Qiming was also tactful. This stab in the back was very straightforward. Not only did he disassociate himself from them, he also surrendered to her. Yu Shu then asked him, "How do you think this matter should be handled?" Ren Qiming's tone was stern as he said, "In this lowly official's view, the scholar's days are too leisurely. That's why they are impetuous and have ideas that they shouldn't have. If they are not punished, I'm afraid that they will be even more savage in the future." Junior supervisor is right, Yu Shu thought and sat up straight. She took a brush from the brush rack. Seeing this, Ren Qiming hesitated for a moment and then went forward to grind the ink for her. Yu Shu shook the brush and mumbled, "I studied in the Grand Historian Yuan for several months and found many bad practices. For example, some scholars were too arrogant and rejected the students who were studying hard outside the door. There were also some scholars who used their positions to seek personal gain and did not focus on teaching. All these things are because the 18 scholars do things their own way. There is one less person to manage the overall situation and the Celestial Commissioner has indulged too much, leading to today's situation. Why don't we choose a chief from among them and send a supervisor from the Celestial Commissioner to supervise the Grand Historian Yuan to correct the conduct?" Chapter 806. The rebellious army led by Feng Xiao set up camp outside Dingzhou. 100 li to the north was the great Yanzhuyang County. The advance army only had 30,000 men and horses. They did not dare to advance rashly, so they sent scouts to Yuyang to spy on the military situation. They did not know that their every move had been reported back to Ningdong. Jiang Huaying divided the 5 counties in the northeast and occupied 62 counties, a tenth of the De territory. Before he became emperor, more than half of the county officials willingly submitted. The rest were occupied by force. The northeast army swept through, beheading hundreds of court officials in one night. More than 10,000 soldiers surrendered, and the people had no will to resist. Jiang Huaying effortlessly obtained a piece of the country. After wearing the yellow robe, the Yan emperor set the capital at Ningdong, divided the 5 counties and stationed the army in various strategic locations. He then appointed his trusted aides and established a court to discuss politics. It was worth mentioning that Jiang Huaying's sworn brother, Lu Shining, had saved Empress Dowager Wei and the eldest princess from danger. He then presented the new policy 36 rules for the court. The Yan emperor placed great importance on him and made him a marquis of a different surname. Hearing that the court's army had arrived in Dingzhou, the Yan emperor immediately called a court meeting to discuss countermeasures. Imperial advisor Lu Yan was an expert from the mountains. Because of his divine foresight, he usually predicted good or bad fortune for the soldiers. Everything came true, so everyone trusted him. He observed the stars at night and calculated a divination. It was hidden wolf in the west, killing star in the south, do not use the hidden dragon. The Yan emperor asked what it meant. Lu Shining answered, hidden wolf in the west should be the Mongols' restlessness. Not long ago, Timur, a descendant of northern Yuan, united the Tartars and Wala tribes. His momentum is at its peak. If he invades the court, he will definitely pass through Yan territory or fight. And killing star in the south should be a hidden dragon in the army. There is a fierce general who is in charge of fighting and killing. This is not good for our army. In the temporarily expanded imperial court, the voices of the newly appointed civil and military officials rose one after another. The Yan emperor frowned. Wolves in front and tigers behind. Won't the Yan be attacked from both sides? Is there a way to resolve this? After they finished speaking, the officials all offered their suggestions. Some said to strike first and seize Dingzhou before the 3 armies of the Yan dynasty could meet. Others said to form an alliance with the Mongols and fight the court together. The more the Yan emperor listened, the more his head ached. In the end, it was Lu Shining who spoke. I have a way to wait at ease for the exhausted, but it is a risky move. I wonder if your majesty dares to try? The Yan emperor sat straight and said, Second brother, please speak. Lu Shining's smile hit a dagger. He only said 8 words, feign attack to lure the enemy, divert the trouble to the south. Some did not understand and some only understood half of it. Only the Yan emperor had a military background and was good at strategizing. He understood the meaning of the song and immediately slapped the table in praise. What a good, waiting for the exhausted at ease, worth a try. When he finished speaking, he ignored the confused officials and called for a few generals as well as Lu Shining and Lu Yen to the back of the hall for a secret meeting. 3 days later, the Prince of Chongping, Lu Shining, personally led 8,000 elite soldiers and set off for Mongolia in the night. After Timur became the ruler, he had the ambition to expand his territory. However, he was troubled by the invasion of the south. It was difficult for the cavalry to advance through the mountains and rivers. If they took a detour from the border cities, the journey would be long. They could only go east through Yen territory and resupply along the way. In the beginning, Timur was wary of Jiang Huaying and did not dare to act rashly. Recently, when he heard that Jiang Huaying had become the emperor, he was tempted. He deployed 20,000 cavalry and set up camp on the Murin River in the west of Yen territory. On one hand, he could prevent the Yen army from invading, and on the other hand, he wanted to fish in troubled waters. In the blink of an eye, it was November and the north was freezing. Finally, when the river surface froze, the Mongolian camp advanced east but was ambushed by the Yen army. The two sides fought for half a day and the Yen army was outnumbered and their commander was captured alive. The leader of the Tatars under Timur, Harden Batter, captured the enemy commander and saw that he was a weak scholar. After interrogation, he found out that he was the sworn brother of the Yen emperor and quickly rode back to report. When Timur received this pleasant surprise, he did not hesitate and quickly gathered his troops to meet up with Harden Batter at the Murin River. After personally seeing Lu Shining, Timur saw through the enemy's scheme. It turned out that the Yen army advanced rashly because the Yin dynasty's army had already reached Dingzhou. The Yen emperor sent his troops to provoke the Mongolian cavalry and lure them to attack. At the same time, he showed weakness to the army and surrendered Yuyang to them. When the Mongolian cavalry and the army met, there would definitely be a battle and the Yen army would reap the benefits. Timur was warlike by nature and felt that this was a good opportunity to attack the Central Plains. Thus, he decided to beat them at their own game and ordered Harden Batter to lead 5,000 vanguards and take Lu Shining as a hostage to borrow the Yen territory. Jiang Huaying really valued this sworn brother of his and agreed to borrow the Mongolian army's route to Yuyang County. He also provided the 3 cities with provisions and only asked that Harden Batter would not kill Lu Shining. The two armies came to an agreement and the Mongolian army set off and arrived at the upper valley first. After resting for a night, the 30,000 soldiers set up an ambush north of Yuyang City. In the beginning of the 12th month of the lunar calendar, Feng Xiao sent 10,000 soldiers to attack Yuyang without knowing anything. But before they could even break through the city gate, they were outflanked by the Mongolian army from both sides and caught unprepared. If not for the vanguard general Yin Yuanrong, who fought his way out and brought back 3,000 wounded soldiers, this battle could be considered as a crushing defeat. When Feng Xiao found out that the Yin dynasty had formed an alliance with the Mongolians, he was shocked and immediately reorganized his troops. Just when the Mongolians were feeling proud of themselves, the sound of war drums suddenly came from behind. When they looked around, they saw the Yin dynasty's flag fluttering in the sky and 10 heavy cannons appearing on the high ground. Boom! The sound was earth-shattering. Black fog filled the air and wails could be heard everywhere. No one could see what had just happened. The Mongolian army was in a mess. They had never seen such a scene before. Harden Batter retreated in a panic and unknowingly headed towards the direction of the army's camp. Therefore, everything went according to someone's plan. The 3 armies were engaged in a chaotic battle, but it was the Mongolian army that was attacked from both sides. The Yen army and the rebel army attacked from both sides, and the Yen army retreated back to Yuyang City. They lost less than 100 soldiers, but they had already exhausted the 30,000 soldiers of the Mongolian army. Then they killed the rebel army with a borrowed knife. As for the captured Lu Shining, he had escaped from the enemy's camp and brought back a captive, Harden Batter, who had half of his leg blown off. Lu Shining retreated to Yuyang City and became famous after this battle. No matter it was the Mongolians or the generals of Yin dynasty, after this battle, everyone knew the name of Great Yan's Prince of Chongping. With this, the prophecy of imperial advisor Lu Yen was dispelled. In a short period of time, Timur would not make a comeback, and the Yen army could focus on fighting the Great Yin dynasty. Chapter 807. Yuyang City was under martial law. Tens of thousands of Yen soldiers were stationed in the city. Lu Shining, the Prince of Chongping, held the commander's seal. As the commander-in-chief, he was respectfully invited into the governor's manor by the local garrison. The Mongolian army was defeated and fled to the upper valley. The soldiers of the Yin dynasty did not pursue them for fear of falling into the trap of the Yen army again. Shui Rui did not send troops to pursue them either. The reinforcements from the upper valley had already arrived. It would not be difficult for them to take care of the remaining Mongolian soldiers. That night, in the most spacious room in the prefectural governor's estate, Shui Rui sat on a low couch with his upper body bare. The brazier beside his feet was burning brightly. Jin Ku stood behind him, and he was swiftly treating the densely packed wounds on Shui Rui's back as he complained. I say, you really don't want your life anymore. At that time it was chaos and chaos, you didn't even have time to run for your life, yet you still dared to turn around and capture that Tatar leader. Luckily that arrow missed, otherwise in this life you can forget about seeing that little sister of yours again. Shui Rui chuckled. His deep eyes flashed. No one knew what he was thinking. Why would I not want to die? I just know that Big Brother is secretly protecting me and will not let anything happen to me. In the past year he had long recognized Jin Ku as a chivalrous brother. Jin Ku was pleased to hear that he trusted him so much. But he did not let him off the hook. He said, next time you put yourself in danger, I will not accompany you. This time, in order to win Timur's trust, Shui Rui did not hesitate to pretend to be a captive. He also played the trick of injuring himself to gain the trust of the Mongolian army. Only then did he trick the Mongolian army into entering the Yen territory. After wrapping the bandage around his wound, Shui Rui put on his clothes, picked up the wine jar on the table and took a big gulp from it. The burning knife was strong enough, it was so hot that it burned his chest, yet it just happened to alleviate the pain of his wound. Even though the Tatar's torture methods were far inferior to those tortures that he knew, they were ruthless enough. However, when he thought that he was one step closer to Anling City, he felt that it was all worth it. Don't drink so much. Jin Ku grabbed the jar and shook his head disapprovingly. He did not remember when Shui Rui developed this habit. As long as there was no business, he would get drunk as long as there was wine. I will go somewhere else. You should rest. You haven't slept for many days. Aren't you tired? As soon as Jin Ku finished speaking, he carried the wine jar and left, and he didn't forget to instruct the guards outside to not allow Shui Rui to drink any wine. The prefectural governor's manor was built in an imposing manner. The east chamber was connected to a large garden. Once out of the courtyard, there was an exquisitely carved wooden corridor. Jin Ku had only walked a few steps when he saw a few people walking towards him. It was Guard Zhao of Yuyang. Behind him was a steward, followed by two graceful girls. They wore soft fur coats and embroidered hats. They had red lips and rosy cheeks. Of guards. Guard Zhao recognized Jin Ku and greeted him with a face full of smiles. Although his position was 2 ranks higher than Jin Ku's, he was not as close to the emperor as Jin Ku. Moreover, Jin Ku was Chongping Wang's brother of a different surname. He naturally had to be polite. Jin Ku looked at the 2 girls behind him and stopped to ask, "Where is official Zhao going with these people?" "Oh, I heard that your highness is injured. How can there be no one to serve you?" Guard Zhao said with a face of concern, "The maids in my fu are all stupid. Only the daughters of these 2 concubines are gentle and sweet. I will send them to take care of your highness' daily life as a token of my sincerity." Jin Ku thought to himself, this old fellow can find such an excuse to send his own daughter to warm the bed of his brother. Does he really think that I can't see that he is trying to climb up the social ladder? If Chongping Wang was a lecherous person, the girls of Dadu would have already trampled through the doors of the Wang Fu, not to mention that the Princess Royal still hasn't given up. I advise official Zhao to save it. Jin Ku rudely splashed cold water on his face. My brother is famous for not being close to women. If you want to curry favor with him, you might as well give him a few jars of good wine. Guard Zhao laughed dryly but didn't back down. He moved to the side and said, "Coach Jin, you may go if you have something to do." Jin Ku saw that he didn't know how to appreciate kindness and didn't bother to stop him. He turned and left, letting him hit the wall himself. When his figure disappeared around the corner, Guard Zhao finally stopped smiling and turned to instruct his 2 daughters. "When you see Chongping Wang later, learn to be smart. When we meet the Chongping Prince later, learn to be smart. It'll be your luck if he takes a liking to any of you." The elder daughter blushed while the younger daughter pouted and said, "Father, you said that Chongping Wang is one of the most handsome men in Dadu. Even the princess likes him. You aren't lying to me, are you? If I see an ugly monster with a bull's head and a tiger's face later, I won't agree." The people of Yuyang were open-minded and the girls were sensible at a young age. They weren't ashamed to marry men and women. Guard Zhao laughed, "I'm just afraid that you won't leave when you see him." The father and daughters had their wishful thinking. Who would have thought that when they arrived at the East Wing, they wouldn't even be able to see Shui Rui's face? The army led by Feng Xiao got off to a bad start. They lost their first battle and it was at the hands of the Tatars. Before Feng Xiao could worry about how to send the battle report to the capital, they inexplicably fought another battle. It was a pincer attack with the Yan army against the Mongolian army. In the end they won, but Feng Xiao was filled with anger. This was probably because he found out from the captured Mongolian generals that he was working for the Yan army for free, and all of this was planned by the Yan army's commander, the Prince of Chongping, Lu Shining. Feng Xiao had nowhere to vent his anger. He knew that Lu Shining had retreated to Yuyang City, but he didn't dare to send troops to attack in a short period of time. He was afraid that it was a trap. He had been leading troops for 20 years, but he had never seen someone as cunning as Feng Xiao. Therefore Yin Yuanrong, who had lost the first battle, asked for permission to go out to battle, but was rejected by Feng Xiao. Feng Xiao turned around and wrote a battle report and a memorial to the throne. He sent it to the capital at top speed. 3 days later, the news of victory from Dingzhou reached the capital. It said that the Yan rebels had colluded with the Mongolians and fought with the army of Yuyang County. As a result, the Mongolian army was defeated and retreated. The Yan army also retreated to Yuyang City and didn't dare to go out to battle. Emperor Chongzhen announced this victory in court. All the officials were excited. They all thought that the recovery of Yan was in sight. Only a few people noticed that something was wrong, but they didn't point it out in public. After the court was dismissed, Emperor Chongzhen asked Yushu to stay and went to the Hall of Tranquil Peace. Yushu followed him silently with a strange look in her eyes. When they arrived at the study room one after the other, Emperor Chongzhen's expression could no longer remain calm. He fiercely threw the report that Feng Xiao had sent back to the capital on the imperial desk, then picked up a memorial and threw it in front of Yushu. "Read it first." Yushu calmly picked up the memorial and flipped it open to read the content. When she saw the part about Prince of Chongping, Lu Shining, luring the Mongolian army into the valley, she was slightly stunned. Emperor Chongzhen said angrily, "Since when did Jiang Huaying have such a person by his side? We have never heard of such a person before. It is precisely this unknown Prince of Chongping who has managed to toy with our 100,000 troops." But Yushu clearly knew the real identity of this Prince of Chongping. "I should have listened to your idea and waited for the Mongolians to fight with the Yan traitors first," Emperor Chongzhen said regretfully. "Now I've been used by them, eliminating a problem." He didn't study the art of war for nothing. Now that things have come to this, how could he not know that the Mongolians are afraid of the alliance of the imperial court and the Yan army? They won't make a comeback in a short period of time. Yushu's suggestion of waiting for the Mongolians to tire themselves out is invalid. This was also why he called Yushu to the study alone. It was difficult to talk about it in front of others. Emperor Chongzhen reflected on himself. Yushu wasn't stupid enough to regret it with him. She didn't blame the emperor but advised, "Your Majesty, please don't be impatient. Let me think of a countermeasure." Emperor Chongzhen calmed down and sat down to drink tea. At the same time he gave her a seat. Yushu sat down and thought for a moment before saying, "All is fair in war. General Feng isn't to be blamed for the battle at Yuyang. Your Majesty shouldn't be in a hurry to reprimand him. Instead, you should reward him and stabilize the army's morale. Moreover, the defeat of the Mongolians isn't necessarily a bad thing. At least this way the Yan army can't ally with the Tatars to fight against the imperial court. Yuyang City is easy to defend and difficult to attack. Feng Zhao's army is stationed in Dingzhou. Right now it's just a waste of food. Yesterday I predicted that in 10 days, there will be a heavy snowfall in the north. I'm afraid there will be a snow disaster. It won't be good for our army. Why don't we withdraw half of our 100,000 soldiers to avoid losses? We can wait until the weather warms up next year." Emperor Chongzhen thought for a moment. Although he felt that everything she said was reasonable, he didn't want to show weakness to the Yan. For a moment he was in a dilemma. Seeing this, Yushu couldn't help but sigh in her heart. The emperor was skilled in both the pen and the sword. It was a pity that he was born with an indecisive personality. He was cold-blooded but he couldn't bend. Thus she continued to advise. "The Yan army is good at fighting in a world of ice and snow. Our army is afraid of the cold. Once the snow doesn't melt, we will be in a passive position. The Yan army can't take the initiative to attack. Since they couldn't attack the city and couldn't fight, what was the point of staying there?" "Ah, fine. I'll do as you say. Your Majesty is wise." After leaving the palace, Yushu sat in the carriage in a daze. Her mind was filled with the words, "Prince of Chongping, Lu Shining." This was the first time she heard news of Shui Rue since they parted. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't excited at all. Counting the days, it had been almost a year since they parted. Even if she didn't think about him day and night, she still thought about him and remembered the promise he made that day. But at that time she was still a chess piece that could be manipulated by others. Her life and death were not in her hands. Now she was standing at the top of the Celestial Commissioner looking down on everyone. She wondered if he also heard news of her. What would he think? Yushu shook her head and smiled. She felt that she was thinking too far ahead. The carriage stopped in front of the Celestial Commissioner's door. Yushu got into a sedan and was carried to Taishi Tower. She spent more time in the Celestial Commissioner's office than at home. It wasn't because the Minister of Justice was too busy, but because there were people asking to see her every day. She had to make decisions about everything big or small. When she arrived at Taishi Tower, a black-robed guard reported to her before she stepped onto the bridge. The female prisoner in the dungeon still wants to see you. She killed herself by biting her tongue this morning. He was talking about Ji Xingxuan. Yushu frowned and asked him, "Is she dead?" "I saved her in time." Chapter 808. The Celestial Commissioner had set up a dungeon where all the criminals were locked up who could not see the light of day. In order to escape, Prince Xiang used Ji Xingxuan and her son in exchange for Zhu Muzhao's release. 3 months ago, when Ji Xingxuan was locked up in the dungeon, Yushu had not visited her even once. Now that Zhu Muzhao had passed away, there was no one to restrain Yushu. She felt that it was time to end things between her and Ji Xingxuan. It was the coldest day of the year and the dungeon was dark and damp. The cold air rose from the soles of her feet to the top of her head. Yushu was draped in a spotless snow-white sable coat and her hands were tucked into her sleeves. She carried a small hand warmer in her bosom and the deerskin boots on her feet were thick with cotton soles. There was no sound when she stepped on the ground. The black-robed guard held a torch in his hand and stood in front of her, protecting her in the middle. They came to the door of Ji Xingxuan's cell. The dungeon was filled with stone walls and iron doors. The prisoners locked up here did not see each other and did not see the light of day. The jailer who delivered their meals every day was a mute. After a long period of time, it was easy for a person to get sick. In the end, they would either go crazy or commit suicide. The cell door opened and the torch dispelled the darkness in the room, illuminating the situation inside. Ji Xingxuan was curled up in a pile of hay in the corner. She was wrapped in a dirty and tattered quilt and was trembling. Her hair was disheveled and her face could not be seen clearly. One could only see that her cheeks were sunken and she was pitifully thin. She covered her eyes and slowly raised her head. When she saw Yushu standing outside the door, her eyes widened and she crawled towards the door agitatedly. However, when she was within 5 feet of Yushu, she was kicked back by the black-robed guard. "Stay here obediently," the black-robed guard scolded. Ji Xingxuan collapsed on the ground. The quilt on her body fell open, revealing her skinny body. She struggled to sit up and wrapped the quilt around her in a flurry. She looked up at Yushu, her teeth chattering. Where's my child?" "He's doing very well. He eats well and wears well. He's never been wronged." Yushu told the truth. Seeing that Ji Xingxuan had fallen to such a state, she no longer had the mood to add insult to injury. "I don't believe you. Are you that kind?" Ji Xingxuan's voice was filled with suspicion. She knew very well that they already knew that her child was the flesh and blood of the late emperor, but she didn't know why they took away her child. What she was most afraid of was that the current emperor also knew of this child's existence and would not spare this little life. Yushu asked her, "Don't you want him to live well? Why do you want something to happen to him?" Ji Xingxuan's expression instantly turned savage. "If you harm him, even if I become a ghost, I won't forgive you." Yushu shook her head, her face full of disdain. "You should have known that by giving birth to him, you were giving him a path to death. But you still chose to selfishly take this child. Now you're worrying about his life and death. Isn't it too late? I really don't understand. With your intelligence, why would you lower yourself to such a state? Is it because of that Shifu of yours whose face you haven't even seen? Ji Xingxuan, you are not fit to be a mother." A look of regret floated onto Ji Xingxuan's face. The viciousness from before had disappeared. She lowered her head and gave a series of bitter laughs. "Ha ha ha, it was you who ruined my family and left me with nowhere to go. You're asking me why I lower myself to that state? If it was you, you wouldn't be any better off than me. I know Shifu is using me. But if I didn't listen to his arrangements, I would have become Ning Wang's slave. How would I be any better than now? Now that I think about it, I really made a wrong move. When I first met you in Jing City, I shouldn't have been greedy for your Lu Yao technique and provoked you, a fiend. She was remorseful, but it was too late. Yushu looked at her remorseful expression, but her heart didn't waver. She said, "You know that you only have yourself to blame. You can't blame anyone else." Ji Xingxuan mumbled, "Yes, if I want to blame someone, I can only blame myself for not being as skilled as others, not as lucky as you, not as skilled as you. I tried my best but failed to follow my grandfather's wish to enter the Celestial Commissioner Bureau. But you, in a short 2 years, have already become the chief of the Kunling Bureau." She was trapped in the dungeon and didn't know how long it had been outside. She didn't know that Zhu Muzhao had died and that Yushu was now the head of the Celestial Commissioner Bureau. Yushu didn't say it to hurt her but asked her, "You sought death to see me just to say such nonsense?" Ji Xingxuan hung her head, her messy hair covering her expression. Her tone was sorrowful. "I know that the great Tiandao will not let me go. I know too many secrets that I shouldn't know. Only by dying will you be at peace. I'm not asking you to spare my life, but I'm begging you to spare my child. He's still so young and doesn't know anything. Find a remote place and send him away. As long as he can live in this world, I have nothing else to ask for." As she spoke, she supported her weak body and slowly knelt in front of Yushu. Her posture was extremely humble. "I beg you." Yushu didn't move and asked her, "What's the use of begging me?" Ji Xingxuan said, "As long as you are willing to plead for me in front of the great Tiandao, I believe he will listen to you. After all, you are that person." Yushu raised her eyebrows and thought that she had guessed her identity as the person who broke her life. Yushu suddenly felt pity for Ji Xingxuan. She had this intelligence but used it in the wrong place. "Why should I plead for you?" Ji Xingxuan replied, "I can tell you a secret that you definitely don't know in exchange." Yushu was interested. She waved her hand at the black-robed guards and asked them to leave. She took a step forward and half-squatted in front of Ji Xingxuan. She stretched out her hand and lifted Ji Xingxuan's chin with her fingertips. She made Ji Xingxuan look into her eyes. Ji Xingxuan's body stiffened. She didn't dodge. She softly revealed the secret that she had buried in the deepest part of her heart. It was also the last talisman that her Shifu had left for her to protect her life. She would rather die than reveal it unless she had no other choice. At this moment, for her child, she was willing to take this risk. The Crown Prince, Lu Tan, is not the flesh and blood of the late emperor. He is the child of noble consort Xue and another man. Yushu had always felt that there were few things that could make her change her expression since she had reached her current position. However, this statement shocked her. Lu Tan had already become the emperor. Now, someone was telling her that he was not the son of the late emperor. Say that again? She exerted force in her hand and squeezed Ji Xingxuan's chin. Her ears perked up and her pair of sharp eyes firmly locked onto her. The Crown Prince, Lu Tan, is not the flesh and blood of the late emperor. He is the child of noble consort Xue and another man. Yushu slowly took a breath and asked her again, "With whom?" She had a bold guess in her heart, but it was hard to believe. "I don't know." Ji Xingxuan was afraid that she wouldn't believe her and quickly explained, "It was my Shifu who told me. He said that one day when I am in a situation where I can't live or die, I should tell this secret to save my life. I don't ask you to spare my life, I only ask you to spare my child. I swear that what I said is the truth. If there is even half a word of falsehood, let me fall into the 18 levels of hell after I die, never to be reincarnated." She raised her finger and swore to the heavens. Yushu expressionlessly looked at her and said, "You can swear that what you said is the truth, but how can you guarantee that what your Shifu said is also the truth?" Ji Xingxuan fiercely bit her lips and said, "If you don't believe me, you can verify it. My Shifu said that the Crown Prince, Lu Tan, has a snake-shaped birthmark on the inside of his thigh. His birth father also had the same birthmark on the same place, but the late emperor did not. If you can find out which man noble consort Xue had an affair with before she married, then you can verify what my Shifu told me is true or false." Yushu closed her eyes and calmed the raging waves in her heart. Her great insight art had a small success, so she could naturally distinguish whether Ji Xingxuan was telling the truth or not. As for whether her Shifu was telling the truth or lying, that was something worth considering. The Shifu that Ji Xingxuan wholeheartedly followed was the Prince of Xiang himself. And according to what she knew, the Prince of Xiang and Empress Dowager Xue had an affair. This meant that the Prince of Xiang who had personally told Ji Xingxuan this secret could be the man who caused Empress Dowager Xue to secretly bear the child. It could be imagined that if this secret were to be spread, it would definitely lead to chaos. She let go of Ji Xingxuan and rubbed her fingers together. She stood up and said, "Regardless of whether this matter is true or false, I guarantee that the child will live well." Actually, even if Ji Xingxuan did not beg her, she would not kill a child. She would let Xiao Yu live in this world with a different identity. He would never know who his birth parents were, and she would not destroy his life for the sake of revenge. Hearing this, Ji Xingxuan's dark eyes had a glimmer of light. She did not hear the power behind Yushu's confident tone and thought that she would plead in front of the great insight to protect her child. "Thank you very much." As a mother, her words of thanks came from the bottom of her heart. Yushu looked down at Ji Xingxuan bowing and scraping in front of her for the sake of the child and felt a little relieved. She looked at her one last time and turned to leave. The grudges of the past were written off. Seeing the heavy prison door close in front of her, Ji Xingxuan let out a big sigh of relief and softly fell to the ground. Few people knew that she was born with a kind of talent. She could distinguish between good and bad intentions from others, so she could avoid many disasters. She could feel that Yushu did not have any bad intentions towards her. She had really promised to help her keep the child. "Baby, mother has let you down. I can only do this much for you. I hope that you can grow up peacefully and be an ordinary person. Mother can die in peace." Ji Xingxuan muttered to herself. Only a mother who had given birth to a child could understand this selflessness. She was willing to sacrifice her own life in order to protect the little life that flowed in her veins. In the darkness, she suddenly heard voices coming from outside the door. "Would the great secretary please tell us how to deal with this female criminal? There is no need to care about her. Let her live for as long as she can." "Yes." Chapter 809. Friendly Tip. Bai Ran is the foreign minister. In the blink of an eye, it was the end of the year again and it was time to give gifts. Outside the Yu residence, there were two long lines of people giving gifts that could stretch from one end of Baochang Street to the other. Sometimes they had to wait for a day before they could set foot on the steps of the Yu residence, but no one dared to complain. They had to smile obsequiously and wholeheartedly carry the gifts inside. It was said that the Prime Minister's doorstep was a seventh-ranked official. Zhou Hu finally understood the meaning of this sentence today. Last year, at this time, he was the one who brought people to carry gifts to other people's residences to look at their faces. This year, it was a group of people fighting to look at his face. Now, many people had to politely call him Chief Steward Zhou when they saw him, who said that a servant couldn't have a day of freedom. It depended on what kind of master they followed. As the sun set, the main gate of the Yu residence was closed. No matter how many people were outside, they were all turned away after 5 in the afternoon. This was a rule set by Yushu, and no one in the entire residence dared to disobey it on the surface. Zhou Hu had a stack of scattered banknotes in his sleeves. There were about 300 to 500 taels, which was almost equivalent to 10 years of his monthly allowance. They were all secretly given to him by the people who gave gifts. For the first 2 days he was so scared that he didn't dare to reach out to take it. Then, somehow his master found out. Miss Exeter from the north came to pass on a message and said, "Master said to take what is given to you. Later, when you go to the accounts room and report it, you can keep the other half." Zhou Hu's steps were light. Ever since he came out of his mother's womb, he had never had so much money on hand. After 10 days he could find a place in Enling City to settle down in a spacious house. On his way to the accountant's office, he was thinking that later on he would give a share to his brothers who were guarding the courtyard. Even if he didn't say much, he would at least give each of them a few taels of silver. He would at least have enough to eat and drink. It should be known that the guards in the residence, in addition to food and clothing, 2 sets of clothes per season, and an extra 3 taels a month. Not to mention they would get rewards from their masters from time to time. If they spent it frugally, after 3 to 5 years, they would be able to save enough for a wife and wouldn't need to be single. When Zhou Hu arrived at the accounting room, he saw Bai Ran sitting in the room, fiddling with the abacus and checking the accounts. He came forward and warmly said, "Little brother Bai, why are you alone today? Where is sixth uncle?" Originally, only Uncle Chen Lu was in charge of the accounts in the accounting room. A few months ago, Yushu transferred Bai Ran over, saying that she wanted him to learn accounting. But how could Zhou Hu not understand? Although Bai Ran looked fair and clean like a little girl, he was literate and sensible. Their family's adults were tempering this kid. They felt that it was a waste for him to be a study companion and had the intention to promote him. Because of this, Zhou Hu did not rely on his position as the front yard's chief steward to be arrogant in front of Bai Ran. He was still as amiable as before. Bai Ran put down the account book, stood up and said to Zhou Hu, "Sixth uncle has a stomachache. You will go back and rest first." "Brother Zhou, are you here to pay the accounts?" I will write it down for you. As he said this, he turned around and took out a red leather account book from the cupboard. He sat back down at the table. Zhou Hu took out the banknotes and silver ingots that he had received in private today. Bai Ran checked them twice before she lifted the brush and dipped it in the ink. She wrote it down neatly and then had Zhou Hu write his name at the back and put his fingerprint on it. The servants in the Fu, at the very least, had to learn how to write their own name. Every month, when they received their monthly allowance, they had to sign it before they could receive it. Zhou Hu received almost 200 taels of silver. He was grinning from ear to ear. He immediately took out a small ingot and put it on the table. He generously said, "Take it and buy something delicious." Bai Ran quickly refused. "I can't accept it. The day before yesterday you gave me 2 silver ingots. I have nowhere to spend them. How can I accept your money?" He knew that Zhou Hu received this money openly. Other people wouldn't be jealous. Moreover, Zhou Hu wasn't stingy at all. Every time he received money, he would give it to the people in the front courtyard. Take it, take it. Everyone who sees it has a share. If you don't take it, then you don't put your brother in your eyes." Zhou Hu put on a serious face and forcefully gave it to him. Without waiting for him to push it back, he let go and ran away. Bai Ran didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the round silver ingot in his hand. His pair of bright eyes gradually became confused. He thought to himself, when did it start? His life seemed to be different. Oh yes, it should be from the day he met Yushu in the provided people's home. His life changed into another shape. He clearly remembered that in his previous life, his grandfather was defeated. After the Bai family's property was confiscated, he was sent to the elders' courtyard. Because he was beautiful and literate, he was not in a hurry to be sold. Instead, he was carefully trained so that he could be sent to a high-ranking family to be a spy. Who would have thought that the elders' courtyard was actually a place where spies were placed? He was carefully nurtured for 2 years before he was sent to Prime Minister Xuefu. In the beginning, he was just a small servant in the eldest young master's courtyard who was drying books. He had only seen his master a few times. By chance, he showed his face in front of the eldest young master and was recognized by him. He was made a follower, and from then on, he had the opportunity to get close to his master and secretly pass some unimportant news to the senior courtyard. Later, Emperor Zhao Qing became seriously ill. Ning Wang Lu Hao became the regent of the state. But he didn't have a few days of pride before someone exposed a scandal and he staggered into prison. What everyone didn't expect was that before the old emperor died, he passed the throne to Xiang Wang, who was born from the same mother as him. This caused a lot of opposition. Among them, the celestial commissioner was the most vocal. But in the end, it was still Xiang Wang who sat on the throne and became the Emperor Zhao Yang. After Zhao Yang Emperor ascended the throne, he started to suppress the celestial commissioner. He demoted the Great Commissioner to 3rd rank and all the other officials were demoted. Then he investigated the aristocratic families of the 12 prefectures of the capital and imprisoned all the descendants of the previous emperor. Then Prince Dongjing rebelled and fought against the imperial court. The imperial court sent troops to suppress him but failed. Someone in the capital reported that the eldest son of the Xue family had colluded with Prince Dongjing. There were letters as proof. Prime Minister Xue fell ill in anger and the Xue family never recovered. Not long after, Zhao Yang Emperor charged the Xue family with colluding with the enemy and exiled 17 males of the Xue family, including the collateral branches. The females were sent to the army to serve as JIIs. As a servant, Bai Ran was lucky to escape and return to the residential compound. At that time he didn't know that during the Xue family's exile, Prime Minister Xue died of illness and Xue Rui disappeared mysteriously. 7 years later the world was in turmoil. Prince Dongjing allied with the Mongols and advanced triumphantly. He attacked Anling City and ousted Zhao Yang Emperor from the throne. He supported the son of the late Empress Imperial concubine Xue, the 19th Prince Lu Ling, as the young emperor. At the same time, the eldest son of the Xue family, who should have died on the way to exile, became the imperial preceptor of the imperial court and held all the power. After imperial preceptor Xue became the most powerful minister. He first cleared the Xue family's name and cleared their name. Then he asked Zhao Yang Emperor to be executed by 1,000 cuts and usurped the throne with 81 crimes. His methods were so cruel that even the residential compound couldn't escape. More than 200 spies were beheaded and the rest of the sinful slaves had their tongues cut off and were exiled to the bitter land. Bai Ran, who had once worked as an informer in the Xue family, had personally experienced the Avicii hell and stepped on the road to death with fear. The last image left in his mind was Grand Preceptor Xue sitting on the 8-bearer palanquin and watching the execution with cold eyes, and his pair of pitch-black eyes. Hiss! Byran fell into his memories and couldn't help but shiver. The ingot in his hand was wet with sweat. He took it and knocked on his forehead, using the pain to wake himself up. He said silently over and over again, "God, if you let me live again, I will cherish my life." From the moment he came back to life and returned to the Bai family, he kept reminding himself like this. Therefore, although he entered the residential compound, he would rather be beaten and starved than learn to be a spy. Because he didn't want to go to the side of that evil man in his life. Although there were many differences between this life and his previous life, such as Prince Xiang's failure, the 9th Prince Lu Tan inheriting the throne, and the Shui family didn't end so tragically, but all these differences made him most confused because of his current master. In his previous life he had never heard of Yushu. Brother Ran? A small hand waved in front of him. Byran suddenly came back to his senses. He saw Abe Queasy came in, opened a pair of big round eyes, looked at him with a worried face. "Why are you in a daze? It's dark." Byran slowly smiled and his face regained its spirit. "I seem to have made a mistake just now. I'm afraid that 6th uncle will scold me when he comes tomorrow." Abe Kizo nervously said, "Will 6th uncle scold you? Do you want me to plead with master?" Byran shook his head and couldn't help but touch her head. He took the basket from her hand and said, "No, 6th uncle scolds me for my own good. What delicious food did you send me today?" Chapter 8:10. Xiaoxiu. On the day of the grand opening of Wang Jilu, Yushu did not show up at all. There was no dragon or lion dance, nor was there any musical troupe. Only 2 strings of firecrackers were placed in front of the door, and a long table was set up at the main entrance. Anyone who passed by could receive a large seal stick for free, and they could enter Wang Jilu to find a Master Yi to do a divination within a month, free of charge. On that day no one knew that the owner of this great exchange hall was the current celestial commissioner, and most of the aristocratic families of the 12 prefectures had not heard of the news. The customers who entered the door were either people with a large seal stick to take advantage of the situation, or passers-by who wanted to join in the fun. Wang Jilu was not as grand as the great exchange hall on Shenyuan Street, but inside, it was a completely different world. Inside the door there were 2 waiters, dressed in black robes with red belts, looking refreshed. When they saw the customers enter, they smiled and reminded them, "If you are looking for a fortune teller, please go to the Being Hall on the west side. If you have any difficult illnesses, please go to the Begging Hall on the east side. Also, our great exchange hall will announce tomorrow's weather every morning, so please pay attention to the heavenly secret list in the main hall." After entering the door, the customers would find that this place was very different from other great exchange halls. First, they went to the Begging Hall, where the fortune teller would carefully ask for your name and date of birth, recorded in a book, and give you a number, saying that if you come back within a month, as long as you reported your number, you would be able to receive a good fortune talisman for free. If the Master E in the Being Hall was not accurate, then go to the Begging Hall on the east side of the main hall. There was a row of long counters in the hall, and behind the counters sat young female attendants wearing green skirts and silver-red bikinis, with their hair combed into 2 buns. Each of them had a stack of yellow books and a plate of number sticks in their hands, specializing in dealing with difficult illnesses. What were difficult illnesses? For example, losing a cat or dog, looking for a person or thing, discord between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, discord between husband and wife, evil spirits or bad luck, no matter how big or small, but as long as it could be solved with the Master E, they could all leave a reward here. You only need to pay 10 copper coins of paper and ink and you can take away a stick. Leave your question and your reward and set a time limit. If no one replied when the time was up, not only would they return the reward, but they would also get back the 10 copper coins. If there was a bounty, there would naturally be people who would accept it. Regardless of whether it was a Master E who had passed the Grand Yen examination or not, as long as one entered the building of forgotten opportunities, one only needed to pay 10 copper coins and register in the register. Then one could casually flip through the bounty list here. If he wanted to take the notice, he would need to pay a tenth of the reward as a security deposit, and he would be able to receive a corresponding number plate. He would meet the person who posted the bounty in the guest room on the 2nd floor, and both parties would settle it themselves. Later, he would only need to take the bounty person's number plate to receive the corresponding reward from the Forgetting Opportunity building. At the same time, he left a record and accumulated a sum of money. Such clear rules could be read in detail on the signboard at the entrance of the Seeking Hall. What was worth mentioning was that the 3 bounties with the highest reward would be posted on the heavenly mystery list in the middle of the hall for everyone to see. Therefore, the customers who came and went in the Forgotten Opportunity Tower every day were not only ordinary people who needed to have their fortune told, but there were also idle traders. 10 copper coins was not much at all, so why not exchange it for a chance to earn some extra money? On the first day of the opening, the Masters in the Hall of Forgotten Opportunities were extremely busy. They were all customers who came to ask for their fortune for free, and the Hall of Begging Opportunities was deserted. Throughout the day, there were only a few dozen customers who paid and left their names. However, under the heavenly mystery list in the middle of the hall, there was a group of people surrounding it. Most of them were here to see the weather tomorrow, but they were shocked to see 2 bounties that were posted on red paper and gold words on the list. Son-in-law, looking for a gentleman to marry into the family. He must have good facial features and a good character, have no hidden diseases, be skilled in both the pen and the sword, and be compatible with each other. Bounty, head of the Shui family. Reward, 50,000 taels of gold. Missing person notice. My teacher, Taoist priest Qing Zheng, has traveled the world and is currently searching for his whereabouts. Bounty, Celestial Commissioner's advice. Reward, 10,000 taels of gold. All the customers who entered the Forgetting Opportunity building saw this bounty list and were amazed. They spread the news by word of mouth, not only because of the generous reward, but also because of the person who posted the bounty. There were also people who doubted the authenticity of these 2 bounty lists, and when they asked the manager and staff of the Forgetting Opportunity building, they could only smile mysteriously and reply, "Sir, you probably don't know who my master is." There was no further reply, but it made people anxious and curious to death. Therefore, after 3 days, the name of the Forgetting Opportunity building spread throughout the streets and alleys. Not to mention the south of the city, even the north of the city did not know about it. This evening, a red wooden sedan stopped at the back door of the Forgetting Opportunity building. Lu Hong and Su Qing, one tying the horse and the other knocking on the door. Ever since Yu Shu became the Celestial Commissioner, the 2 of them were promoted to 5th grade Imperial bodyguards and were allowed to travel in front of the Emperor. They finally made it out, and the group of brothers who were still idling around in the Jinwu guards were envious. Yu Shu took over Gu Hong from Zhu Qingjue, and let this mysterious master help her train Lu Hong and Su Qing. Now, the 2 of them were considered the best among the many black-robed guards. The backyard of the Forgetting Opportunity building did not change at all, and was still the same as when the restaurant was first opened. Other than the shopkeeper Lin Fu and a group of staff, there was also Xan Li Shan, the grade master who was in charge here. The idea of Yochio Hall and Being Hall was thought of by Yu Shu, but it was the rules that Xan Li Shan deliberated over. As for the eye-catching Tianji list, the weather forecast was the work of Yu Shu, and the red list bounty was first proposed by Xan Li Shan. Yu Shu had a bright mind, and decided on a son-in-law recruitment notice and a missing person notice, which got Xan Li Shan's approval. The 2 of them were birds of a feather. No, they appreciated each other and worked together to open the Forgetting Opportunity building. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Although it had not started to make profits, it was famous. If it continued to develop like this, it was only waiting for the melon to ripen and the stalk to fall. Sitting in the tea room, Xan Li Shan flipped through the name list in his hand, and grinned at Yu Shu. Today there were 70 to 80 returning customers who got the protective talisman from the Being Hall alone. The cheapest one was asking for money, and they collected more than 200 taels. Half of the 1,000 big seal scripts we gave out on the first day have been collected. In other words, we've got 500 returning customers. 200 taels of silver didn't sound like much at first, but this was a newly opened Forgetting Opportunity building, and it had no reputation to speak of. Every day there were hundreds of customers asking for their fortune, and once it had a good reputation in the future, this number would multiply several times. This didn't include the sale of some trinkets to attract good luck and avoid bad luck, and the expensive feng shui ornaments. "What's the progress at Yochio Hall?" Yu Shu asked. Xan Li Shan was even happier when she mentioned this. "When you first came up with this idea, I was still nervous, afraid that it would mess things up in the end. I didn't expect that in just half a month, there would be more than 100 offers, and the advance payment alone would be close to 1,000 taels of silver. There are also people competing for the last place on the Tianji list, increasing the price one by one. As for the registered customers at Forgetting Opportunity building, there are already more than 100 people, and it's still increasing." A smile finally appeared on Yu Shu's face. Her fingers tapped the lid of the teacup briskly and she said, Let's wait for another month or two, and depending on the situation we can add an extraordinary people list to the Tianji list. The top 5 will be ranked according to the amount of money the customers have accumulated on a daily basis, and they can come to Forgetting Opportunity Building to collect a salary every month. Not only did she want to build a trading platform at Forgetting Opportunity Building, but she also wanted to take this opportunity to win over a large number of idle customers, so that they could be used by Forgetting Opportunity Building and become a force in her hands. Hearing this, Xan Lishan secretly clicked his tongue. Although Yushu's attitude towards him was the same as before after she became the big tipping point, he still felt that she was becoming more and more dignified by the day, and she involuntarily exuded a strong aura, which made people unconsciously feel inferior in front of her. Speaking of which, fifth uncle, have you considered the matter I mentioned to you last time? Yushu changed the topic and looked at him. Xan Lishan touched his nose and said embarrassedly, I'm used to being free. If you ask me to become an official at the Celestial Commissioner, I'm afraid I won't be able to stay there. Besides, I don't get along well with the left judge. It's fine if we don't meet, but when we meet, your eyes are red and your face is anxious. Aren't you afraid that I'll make a mess of the Celestial Commissioner? The resentment between Xan Lishan and Xia couldn't be resolved. Yushu didn't want to intervene, but she felt it was a pity that she couldn't accept such a capable great change master like Xan Lishan into the Celestial Commissioner. She didn't need to use the great insight technique to see that it wasn't that Xan Lishan didn't want to become an official, but because of Xia, he didn't want to give in. Think about it again. I'll reserve the position of the right magistrate of the Astronomical Bureau for you. When you've thought it through, just let me know. Xan Lishan nodded lightly and understood her good intentions. After the two finished discussing business, Yushu rested at Wangji Tower that night. She didn't sleep upstairs but downstairs in the room that Shui Rui had once lived in. The incense burner in the room was filled with the orchid scent that he loved. It was as fresh and elegant as he was, making her feel comfortable. That night she had a dream. She dreamed that she was sailing with him on Jade Lion Lake, admiring the wind and the moon, spending the night together. When she woke up the next day, Yushu was in a good mood. The trace of a smile hung on the corner of her mouth all the way to the Celestial Commissioner. Just as she arrived at Taishi Tower, she heard the good news from the palace. Empress Jiang had given birth to a little imperial son this morning and both mother and child were safe. Yushu quickly changed her clothes and entered the palace to meet. When she hurried to Feng Zhao Palace, there was already a group of women sitting in the side hall. Empress Dowager Rui and Empress Dowager Shui had come, as well as Rui Shu Fei and Mei Jiu. 3 women were a play and there was one more here. How could Yushu not know the undercurrents? But these women of high status in the palace had all suffered at her hands before, so for now no one dared to provoke her. Emperor Chongzhen was probably keeping the empress company in the bedroom. After a while, he led the wet nurse who was carefully carrying the eldest imperial son over for the 2 empress dowagers to see. Oh, this nose and eyes, they're all good looking. One look and you can tell he's a child of good fortune. Empress Dowager Rui rushed to carry the child first and gave a string of compliments. Empress Dowager Shui didn't keep her cold face and revealed a smile as she said, "Isn't that so? I think this child looks more like the emperor." She turned her head to say to Emperor Chongzhen, "This child looks exactly the same as you when you were born." Everyone could see the emperor's joy. No one present was disappointed. Even Rui Shu Fei didn't say any sour words. Lotus Room, Emperor Chongzhen waved a hand at Yushu, asking her to come forward to look at the child. He told her, "Celestial Commissioner, come up with a few auspicious words. Zhen has to choose carefully and give the eldest imperial son a good name." Yushu looked at the infant in the swaddling clothes. It was red and wrinkled like a monkey. It wasn't even as white and chubby and cute as Xiaoyu at home. But because it was Xia Jiangmin's child, her eyes couldn't help but soften, the fire between her brows warming. Chapter 8:11. In the first year of Chongzhen, on the 27th day of the 12th lunar month, Empress Xiajiang gave birth to her eldest son. Emperor Chongzhen was very happy and rewarded Fengzhou Palace 3 times a day. When the good news came out, the court was filled with joy, sweeping away the previous gloominess. The Celestial Commissioner appointed Yu Lianfang to personally read the 8 characters of the great prince's name. Later, Emperor Chongzhen gave him the name Luing. In the Taishi Tavern, the eunuch bowed and left after passing the message. When Yushu heard that the emperor only chose the word "ing" from the dozens of characters she carefully selected, she couldn't help but sigh. Sitting on the throne, she muttered to herself, It seems that this child is indeed fated with me. The word ing was full and had more than enough. On New Year's Eve, a heavy snowfall suddenly came and continued for 3 days. Just as Yushu had said when she persuaded Emperor Chongjin to withdraw his troops, this heavy snowfall covered the entire north. There was no way to fight anymore. 50,000 troops were enough to stay behind. The further north they went, the colder it became. Half of the troops led by Feng Xiao were transferred from Liangjiang and were not used to the icy weather. If they didn't retreat in time before the weather changed, it was easy to imagine how many soldiers would freeze to death. The heavy snow blocked the roads, so the palace banquet for the first lunar year had to be cancelled. Most of the civil and military officials stayed at home, waiting for the snow to stop. Half a month ago, because the emperor listened to Yushu's letter and ordered the withdrawal of the troops, the officials who were dissatisfied with her and attacked her were all very guilty now. From New Year's Eve to the 6th day of the first lunar month, the snow fell for 7 days before it stopped intermittently and reluctantly. Fortunately, the people had enough New Year's goods and could live behind closed doors. They didn't have to go out to visit relatives, so this New Year's Eve had a special taste. The next day the weather was clear. The streets and alleys of the capital could be seen everywhere sweeping the snow. There were also children wearing thick cotton-padded jackets and trousers running around, having snowball fights and making snowmen. It had been many years since they had seen such heavy snow. The children were playing crazily and even the adults were eager to play. Several of Yushu's maidservants from the North Palace woke up early to help her freshen up. When she went to the study room to practice her calligraphy, only Abe Queasy was left to serve her. Then one by one they sneaked out to the courtyard to play in the snow. Yushu copied a piece of calligraphy and raised her head to see Biki looking out the window. She smiled and said, "You should go too. There's no need to stand here." Her handwriting wasn't pretty, but she had put in a lot of effort to practice it over the past 6 months. From barely presentable to presentable, she had made rapid progress. Although it couldn't be said to be very good, she had her own style. Akiko Abe shyly said, "Master, why don't you take a break and go outside? This slave heard that young master and Byran made a big snowman yesterday. Today, Chief Steward Zhou will bring people to carve an ice lantern." Yushu looked at the pure white snow outside the window, unmoved. She gently shook her head and said, "You go ahead, I think it's cold." Actually, she wasn't afraid of the cold. She just didn't have the mood to play around. There was a war in the north and there were hidden worries in the court. Now she needed to worry about everything. How could she have the leisure to play around? Akiko Abe skipped away. Yushu calmed down and wrote for another half an hour. She put down her brush and stretched her waist. She called out to the people outside but no one answered. She thought that they had all gone out to watch the fun. It was rare for them to be happy. Yushu wasn't angry. She put the teapot on the stove to heat it up. Not long after, Yundo, who went to the east courtyard early in the morning, came back with a tray. When she entered the door, she saw that no one was serving her. Yushu was actually boiling tea for herself. Yundo quickly put down the tray and went forward to take over. She muttered, "This group of girls must have gone to play in the snow. When they come back, this slave will deal with them." Yundo had become more and more steady these days. Originally, she wasn't as good as Xner and wasn't as clever as Liner, but now she managed the group of maidservants in the north courtyard. She firmly occupied the position of the #1 maidservant in front of Yushu. "Let them play. It's been many years since I've seen such a big snow." Yushu pointed at the tray she had just put down and asked, "What is that?" Yundo poured tea for her. She turned around and took the tray and put it in front of her. "Miss forgot. Today is the 7th day of the Lunar New Year. Girls have to wear flowers. The 2 foreign have prepared it for you." As she spoke, she took out the flowers that Zhao Hui and Aunt Chui had sent for her to see. One was a corolla made from flowers that bloomed all 4 seasons in Yongchun Yuan. The other was a flower hairpin made from real gold, silver, and jade leaves. At this time, Yushu's hair was loosely tied into a bun at the back of her head. Yundo tried to compare the 2 flowers on her head and said with a smile, "Mrs. Skin is snow white. Either one looks good on you. The 2 foreign have put in a lot of effort. Shall this slave help you comb your hair and change?" Yushu's expression was somewhat absent-minded. She took the exquisite and small corolla from her hand and said with lowered eyes, "Wait a moment. Go to the front and see how the ice lantern carvings are going." Yundo agreed and left, leaving her to stare at the 2 flowers in a daze. She slowly got up and walked to the bookshelf on the west wall. She opened a drawer in the corner and took out a white jade box. Opening the jade box, she saw a cluster of dried yellow flowers lying quietly at the bottom of the box. It was so withered that it was unrecognizable. Her fingers gently touched the petals, but what appeared in her mind was their original cute appearance. This was the flower that Shui Rui had personally put on the flower for her on the National Day 2 years ago. At that time, the falling flower was still in love with the heartless water. He had quietly placed her in his heart, but his every move had long revealed his feelings. This flower was called the fragrant knot, also known as the winter dream flower. There were flowers before there were leaves just like him to her. The fragrant knot also had medicinal properties and could improve eyesight. He must have been secretly reminding her at that time to open her eyes and look at him. Ah! Yushu laughed softly and a pool of tenderness appeared on her face. Holding the fragrant knot in the jade box, her heart was filled with longing for a moment, and the corners of her eyes became sour. In the end, a woman was still a woman. Even if she was sitting in glory and wealth at the height of her power, she still longed for that person in the bottom of her heart. A burst of laughter came from outside. Yushu suppressed her thoughts, closed the jade box and put it back into the drawer. She turned around and sat back on the couch. When the maids entered the door, they saw her still calm as usual. Master, look, this is the little rabbit that this servant made. Doesn't it look like one? Akiko held a snow dumpling and presented it to her. The room was warm and the rabbit's ears quickly melted. Without the tail, it didn't look like a rabbit, but more like a little mouse that only knew how to eat and sleep all day. Yushu couldn't bear to hurt her, so she nodded and said, "It's pretty good." Exener and Lin winked at each other. Yundo smiled and glared at them. She turned back to Yushu and said, "Chief Steward Zhou has been carving ice lanterns in the garden since yesterday. There are all kinds of them and there will be something to see tonight. If you are willing to give them face and take a look, then their efforts won't be in vain." Yongchen Yuan was like spring all year round and it was rare that it snowed. It was a different kind of beautiful scenery. Zhou, who was originally from a bitter and cold place, so he was very good at carving ice. Yushu agreed. Looking at the happy faces of the maids, she also smiled and said, "Take my invitation. Send people to the Xian family to invite 6th young lady, and the Fang family to invite Miss Situ. Let's have a good time tonight and set up 2 tables to eat." Chapter 8:12. In the 4th year of Emperor Chongzhen, there were many wars in the north. The imperial court kept conscripting soldiers, and the military expenses were endless. The corvée and taxes were doubled, and the common people had no way to make a living. The Great Han dynasty had been peaceful for 300 years, and even the imperial examinations and the Great Yan examination were forced to stop. 2 years ago the Yan army conquered Dingzhou and entered Hebei. The imperial court suffered another defeat and retreated to Taiyuan. The two sides were divided by the Funyo River. In the blink of an eye, it was the new year again. The common people in Enling City did not celebrate the new year as they did in the past. Everyone was in a state of panic. They did not know when the Yan army would come to the capital. Many well-informed people secretly packed their belongings and prepared to go to the south to seek refuge with their relatives after the new year. If the common people were so frightened, then the imperial court officials who knew the Yan army better. Before the new year, there were many family members of officials who left the capital to seek refuge. They did not dare to leave openly, so they used the excuse of visiting relatives and friends. Some even resigned and fled in the night. When Emperor Chongzhen heard this, he was furious. On the same day, he ordered the arrest of those good-for-nothings who resigned and fled and put them in prison. He also ordered the Yulin royal guards to investigate the situation. Any family member of an official who left the capital without a reason was severely punished. Because of this, a lot of people were implicated and imprisoned. There was no celebration during the new year. Everyone lived with their tails between their legs, afraid that the emperor's anger would burn on them. Yushu was one of the few ministers who were not affected by the war. Over the past few years, the emperor had put a lot of trust in her. Although the army sent by the imperial court to suppress the rebels had suffered losses on the battlefield, with her advice and strategies, they had won a few battles and slowed down the advance of 100,000 Great Yan soldiers. Otherwise, the Great Yan army would have conquered Taiyuan by now. Emperor Chongzhen was a proud and arrogant man. He was full of ambition, but he was born at the wrong time. If it were a peaceful era, he might be able to grow into a wise emperor. But it was a time of chaos. The imperial court under his rule had long decayed. How could it resist the emperor of Great Yan, who had a group of followers who risked their lives for him? On the 15th of the first month, there was a lantern festival in the city. In the evening, the streets were bustling with noise and excitement. There was a sea of people everywhere, and it was completely different from the desolation of the past few days. It was as if the common people in the capital had waited until today to go out. Yushu originally wanted to stay at home and enjoy a leisurely life, but she couldn't stand Xiaoxiu's coaxing and pestering. In the end, she still went out and took a look at Ma Street. In 3 years' time, the Forgotten Opportunity Tower's reputation rose sharply. It was not an exaggeration to say that in the capital city, there was nobody who did not know of it. Yuqiu Hall and Bingying Hall's business strategy was very successful, and people gradually got used to this place that offered bounties to solve problems. It was normal for them to make a lot of money every day, and the sky-high bounties on the Heavenly Secrets list and the rankings of the people became the hottest topic of discussion after a meal. Any random person on the street would be able to talk about it clearly and logically. When the other aristocratic families' great trade shops discovered that their business had been snatched by the Forgotten Machine Building, it was already too late for them to turn around and try to rope in more customers. Even if there were people who imitated the Forgotten Machine Building and set up bounties and lists in the great trade shops, they were far from being able to compete with the Forgotten Machine Building's monopoly and good management. In the end, they all ended up with nothing and became mere decorations. The Forgotten Machine Building didn't close its doors for the new year. From early in the morning to the hour of the 5 o'clock, there was an endless stream of people coming and going in front of the main entrance. Most of the shops on Ma Street were open. There was no curfew during the Lantern Festival, so there were many night wanderers. The nearby restaurants and tea houses all benefited from the Forgotten Machine Building, so they didn't have to worry about not having customers. There were many people on the street. The horse carriage stopped at the intersection, and Yushu and Xiaoxiu got off and walked. Colorful lanterns hung on both sides of the street, winding without end, rendering the dark night as bright as day. The pedestrians coming and going were all glowing, either stopping in front of the stalls to pick out lanterns or walking in groups. There were even some young women with makeup on their faces, holding round fans in their hands as they walked through the crowd. Yushu walked leisurely while Yushio walked briskly in front of her. From time to time, he would turn his head and chat with her, attracting many sidelong glances. 3 years had passed, and now Yushio had grown into an outstanding youth. He had suddenly grown a lot taller, with delicate features and a pair of bright and spirited eyes. At a glance, one could tell that he was the son of a wealthy family. There was no trace of the inferiority complex that he had when he was a child. Yushu, on the other hand, was dressed in a light coat of silk and was dressed in men's clothing. A silver-gray fox hat covered the scarlet scar between her eyebrows. She had an extraordinary bearing, and wherever she passed, pedestrians would give way to her. Even looking at her for a second longer would cause them to feel offended. Lu Hong and Su Qing followed behind them, neither too far nor too close. There were also some accompanying black-robed guards. They were all disguised as ordinary people, mingling in the crowd to protect Yushu's safety at all times and places. Entering Wang Ji-lu, Lin Fu, who was strolling around the main hall, came up to greet them with his sharp eyes. Yushu waved her hand to indicate that he did not need to follow. She led the others through the hall to the backyard. Xan Li Shan was calculating the accounts that had been collected over the past few days. On the long table, there were several small mountains of silver that were piled up, sparkling under the light. There were also 2 large chests of copper coins on the ground to the side. As soon as one entered the door, one could smell the stench of copper, but he was beaming with pride and was very happy. "Fifth uncle, you're counting silver again?" Yushio teased as soon as he saw him. In the past few years he had often come to Wang Ji-lu to play, so he was quite familiar with the group of people here. Xan Li Shan put down the shiny ingot in his hand and deliberately put on a stern face. "You little brat, I only have this little happy thing and you always make fun of it. To think that I stayed up for 2 nights to make a general's lantern for you." Yushio giggled and moved closer to say good words. "I was wrong, please don't lower yourself to my level. Fifth uncle is the best to me. Where's my general's lantern?" This general's lantern was the same as the Kong Ming lantern, both could be released into the air. The difference was that the former was more elaborate and could be held in one's hand with a string, so there was no need to worry that it would fly away. The pattern on the wall of the lantern would change back and forth as it rose and fell, making it infinitely interesting. Last year Xan Li Shan had made one for him. It was unique in Jing City, no one could copy it and it could not be sold outside. Xan Li Shan was also very obedient. Yushu had asked him several times to come out of retirement, but he was not willing to become a celestial commissioner. Instead he was willing to hide in Wang Ji-lu and be a miser, researching his strange little inventions. Here it's inside, take it and play with it. Yu Xiu found a very large general's lantern and happily went to the courtyard to release the lantern. Only Yu Xiu and Xan Lishan were left in the room, the two of them chatting about serious matters. I heard that the emperor lost his temper because some officials left the capital to seek refuge. You weren't affected, right? While Xan Lishan did not go out, he was very well informed. It doesn't matter to me. My whole family is staying in Jing and hasn't gone anywhere, Wang Yao said. Yu Xiu shook her head and said with a smile, but left Judge Xan secretly sent his 2 sons and daughters out of the capital. When the emperor investigated, he was so frightened that he said he was sick and did not dare to go out. Right now, Anling looked calm on the surface, but inside it was a mess. Xan Lishan looked worriedly at her and said, "The Yen army is about to break through Taiyuan and attack the capital. Why are you not anxious at all?" "What is there to be anxious about?" Yu Xiu said calmly, "Even if they take the capital, can they kill all the officials in court? The Yen emperor wants the country not to slaughter the world." Xan Lishan was silent. These years he could not see through her. Even if he sensed her attitude, he could not guess what she was thinking. As a powerful official, she also played politics and formed cliques. But he could not feel how infatuated she was with power and had no loyalty to the emperor. It seemed that what she had done these years was just to fulfill her duty and play the role of the celestial commissioner, and not out of her own will. Strange. Now that you say this, I have nothing to fear. He touched his chin and said, "Originally, I planned to take the wealth of Wangji Tower and escape in the night." Laughter flashed in Yu Xiu's eyes. "Then I have to send 2 more people to watch you. If you run, where can I find a second god of wealth?" Xan Lishan laughed and the solemn atmosphere disappeared in an instant. That night, the siblings returned to the mansion. They had just entered the door of the north wing when a round little cannonball rushed towards them. It hugged Yu Xiu's thigh and raised its head to reveal a big white and chubby face. It pouted its little mouth and sniffed the tip of its nose, which was red from the cold. It blinked its eyes in an aggrieved manner. Mother and uncle went out to play and did not bring little Guogua. The 2 maidservants caught up with her, panting and calling her little ancestor. When they saw Yu Xiu, they timidly stopped and said with a pale face, "Little Gongzi woke up and was clamoring to look for you. When we were not paying attention, he snuck out." A few years ago, Yu Xiu adopted this godson. Although she did not deliberately spoil him, he was more mischievous than normal children. He was only 5 years old and could climb trees and dig out bird nests. He often brought He Xiaochuan and Yu Xiu to play tricks on the servant girls in the Fu. He was the #1 little devil in the family. Yet he knew how to act obedient and sweet talk. He could coax Zhao Hui and old Tai Tai He. They often covered for him. Even Yu Xiu had a headache for him. Yu Xiaoguo had caught a cold from playing yesterday and was sick. He was more clingy than usual. Last night he slept in Yu Xiu's room. His fever only went down this morning. "You are disobedient again. I won't take you out." Yu Xiu reprimanded him, but her hands quickly took off her cloak and wrapped it around her son. She picked him up from the ground and walked inside. Yu Xiaoguo obediently hugged her neck, his eyes moving around. He turned his head and saw the tiger lantern in his Jiujio's hands. He sweetly called out, "Jiujio." Yu Xiu reached over to pinch his cheeks. He smiled and handed the lantern to him. He said dotingly, "When you get better, Jiujio will take you out to play. I'll buy you whatever you want." Yu Xiaoguo's face was full of hope, but he did not forget to raise his head to look at his mother's expression. "We'll talk about it after you get better," Yu Xiu said with a straight face. Yu Xiaoguo lowered his head and didn't dare to bargain with her. Even at such a young age, he had learned to read people's expressions. He knew who was in charge of the family and who had the most influence. Yu Xiu carried him back to the room and watched him drink the medicine. She listened to him mumble nonsense. After a while, the child couldn't take it anymore and fell asleep. She patted his head and covered him with the blanket. Looking at his innocent sleeping face, she did not regret it. She was the first to preside over the ancestral worship ceremony in the 2nd year of Chongzhen. She did not take this child to the secret chamber of the tomb to verify if he had the heavens mandate grand bone, but left him behind. Ji Xingxuan could not endure it and died of illness in the dungeon 2 years ago. In this world, besides the Prince of Xiang, only she knew his background. Outsiders only knew that he was the child of an old friend that she had adopted. There were even some unflattering rumors that Yu Xiaoguo was born out of wedlock, but no one suspected that she had raised the flesh and blood of her enemy. It was funny to say that it was because of this living child that she had lived like a princess for the past few years. She did not let her desire for power take over her heart, did not let her eyes be blinded by greed, and did not change into another person. His existence constantly reminded her not to forget her original intentions. No matter how high she sat, no matter how much power she had, what she wanted was to protect the safety of her family. She only wanted to have a clear conscience. Chapter 8:13. Once winter passed, the flames of war rose again. In the 5th month, bad news came from the front line. Taiyuan was lost. Marshal Feng Xiao died on the battlefield. The Yen army was only 800 miles away from the capital. The court fell into chaos overnight. Duke Jing and Count Zhongyong led a group of ministers to kneel outside the peaceful palace and beg Emperor Chongzhen to take refuge in Luoyang Palace. Emperor Chongzhen ignored them and insisted on staying in Enling. Everyone had no choice but to go to the Celestial Commissioner to ask Yu Shu to persuade him. The Yen rebels are about to attack the capital, but His Majesty refuses to leave. Master Yu, His Majesty listens to you the most. If you don't advise him now, when will you? Inside Taishi Tavern, Yu Shuwen sat on her Qilin treasured chair, looking coldly at the old officials who were used to opposing her and using soft words to stand up for her. What do you want me to advise His Majesty about? She said unhurriedly. Advise His Majesty to leave the capital, hand over the 300 years of end to the rebels, and become a ruined ruler? As she said this, her face suddenly darkened. She stood up and slapped the table. The country is about to fall. Instead of defending the country, you want to escape? Thinking back to the time when Emperor Xingzu ruled the world, did he ever think that his descendants would become stray dogs? Yulianfang, how dare you? Count Zhongyong Rueang pointed at her and scolded, I wonder why His Majesty insists on staying in the capital. It is you who instigated him. What are your intentions? Consort Rue Shu had not been favored in the harem these years and did not give birth to a son or daughter. Even the emperor did not like Count Zhongyong's residence. On the contrary, Empress Xia Jiang, who was supported by the Celestial Commissioner, was always favored. Rueang and Yu Shu were political enemies, so he blamed everything on her. At this moment he had no more scruples and did not need to be polite. Duke Jing sighed. In the face of national crisis, the overall situation is the most important. I would rather you not know that His Majesty can do nothing by staying in the capital. Listening to this old man's advice, we all entered the palace together to persuade His Majesty to temporarily leave the capital to avoid disaster. As long as the Green Hills remain, there will be no need to worry about a lack of firewood. Yu Shu snorted coldly. Do you think that after persuading His Majesty to leave, you will be able to run for your lives in broad daylight? No need to talk nonsense. Since His Majesty wants to defend Enling to the death as a subject, I will accompany him with my life. As for you cowards who are afraid of death, good luck. With that, she waved her sleeves and turned around to send the guests off. The group of people were so angry that their faces turned red, but seeing that she was not going to budge, they had no choice but to leave. Yu Shu sat quietly for a moment, then went up to the top floor alone. She walked into the morning hall where the memorial tablets of the previous generations of the great Celestial Commissioner were engraved. She took out 3 sticks of incense and lit them. She stared at the last tablet that was added. On it was engraved the words 9th Celestial Commissioner, Great Zhu Mu Zhao. That day I swore to live and die with the Celestial Commissioner, and I kept my word. However, the change of dynasties is the will of heaven. Forgive me for being powerless, but I can only follow the will of heaven. I can only promise you that I will protect the Don royal family. As for whether there is hope for the future generations to restore the country, it will have to wait for a few years. She bowed 3 times and lit the incense. Then she turned around and went downstairs. She sent someone to prepare a carriage to enter the palace to see the emperor. If Emperor Chongzhen wanted to stay in the capital, she would not dissuade him. That was his responsibility as the ruler of a country. However, Xia Jiangmin and the eldest Prince Lu Ying must leave as soon as possible. Her law of time of calamity could deduce hundreds of disasters. The Book of Life and Death could investigate the cause and effect. It was comparable to the real art of death. According to her divination, Xia Jiangmin and her son would be killed within 3 months. If they wanted to save their lives, they must leave the capital. Yu Shu entered the palace to persuade the emperor. On the same day, Emperor Chongzhen ordered the 2 Empress Dowagers and Empress Xia Jiang to move to the palace in Luoyang to avoid the summer. When the news reached the harem, it caused panic among the concubines. They were afraid that they would be left in the capital to wait for death. They all went to beg the Empress Dowager and the Empress to take them away. There were only a few who volunteered to stay with the emperor, and Empress Xiajiang was one of them. I am not willing to live an ignoble life. I will be with your majesty wherever you are. I will live and die with you. Empress Xiajiang ran to Emperor Chongzhen and expressed her feelings. One sentence made Lu Tan's eyes turn red. He held Xia Jiangmin's hand and asked his attendants to leave. He confided in her, Min Min, I know your heart is enough. Listen to me, I cannot leave the capital. It is not only because of my anger. As the ruler of a country, even if I lose my life, I cannot lose the country left by my ancestors. If I escape now, I will be laughed at by the world. I will truly become the ruler of a destroyed country. I'm not willing, I cannot. Xia Jiangmin cried, If your majesty wants to stay, then stay. I will not leave. Lu Tan shook his head and said in a determined tone, Take my son away. If anything happens to me, you need to raise him well until he grows up. Then you can plan the great cause of restoring the country. Xia Jiangmin shook her head with tears and buried her head in his chest. She and the emperor were a young couple. They loved each other deeply. How could they bear the pain of separation? How could they know that after this separation, there would be no day for them to meet again? She was afraid that they would be separated forever. Humans and ghosts were different. Even when she was tired from crying, Lu Tan did not change his mind. He made up his mind and sent her back to Fengzhou Palace. Then he drafted an edict to confer the title of the crown prince, Lu Ying. That night, Xia Jiangmin had a series of nightmares. She woke up before dawn. She sat up straight in a cold sweat and cried, Come quickly. Outside the door, a palace maid ran into the bedroom and lit the candles. She moved closer to the bed. Your Highness, you had a nightmare. Let me pour you a cup of tea. Xia Jiangmin was still in shock and asked blankly, What time is it? It's past 5 in the morning. She looked outside the window and it was still dark. She came back to her senses and said, Quickly send someone out of the palace to ask for advice. Just say that I had a nightmare last night and need her to explain it. Yes, I will send someone to ask for her. Seeing that she looked terrible, the palace maid did not dare to ask more and hurried away. Xia Jiangmin hugged a thin quilt and recalled the situation in her dream. Her fingers clenched the corners of the quilt and trembled slightly. After waiting for 2 hours, when the sun rose, Yu Shu hurried to the back palace. Xia Jiangmin had already washed up and was waiting for her. Hearing the announcement from outside, she asked the people in the hall to leave and was alone with Yu Shu. Yu Shu understood and asked her as soon as she sat down, Did you dream of a dead person again? Few people knew that Xia Jiangmin was born with a talent that allowed her to foresee the cause of death of a person in her dreams. For example, her late sister Xia Jiangying and Xn Lu, who was lucky enough to escape, had almost a 100% accuracy rate. Xia Jiangmin nodded with a pale face. She stared at her and said in a hoarse voice, Shu, I dreamed that you died. Yu Shu was shocked at first and then frowned. She asked, What did you dream of? Xia Jiangmin recalled and said absent-mindedly, I dreamt that the Yen bandits took over the capital and captured the emperor. You brought people to rescue the emperor, but you were captured and imprisoned by them. Then a man dressed in red stabbed you to death with a sword. Her dream could only describe a general idea, but she remembered the key points. For example, when Yu Shu was killed and what characteristics the murderer had. Hearing this, Yu Shu looked down in deep thought and didn't speak for a long time. Xia Jiangmin pushed her shoulder anxiously and said, You have the art of predicting death. Why don't you read for yourself? Yu Shu sighed. My art of predicting death requires the 8 characters of my birth, but my 8 characters are not compatible with my fate. It is difficult to read. Xia Jiangmin was suddenly at a loss. She grabbed her arm and said, What should we do? Why don't you leave the capital as soon as possible? I will plead with the emperor to let you go to Luoyang to take refuge. Yu Shu's eyes flashed but she didn't waver. She shook her head and refused, I won't go. Xia Jiangmin anxiously cried, The emperor is like this, you are also like this. You know that staying is a dead end, but you don't listen to other people's advice. What should I do? The corners of Yu Shu's mouth twitched helplessly. She pulled the other's cold hand and softly comforted, It's clear that the emperor doesn't go because he has the country in his heart. I don't want to go because I am waiting for someone. People live in this world and each have their own fate. I can't avoid it and I can't escape it. Xia Jiangmin didn't understand her words and asked with teary eyes, You are waiting for someone, who are you waiting for? Yu Shu shook her head and didn't say anything more. Xia Jiangmin knew that she couldn't force her. She stopped crying and said with disappointment, If I didn't have children to hold me back, I would definitely stay in the capital to live and die with the emperor. I don't fear death, but I can't ignore my son. It's good that you think like this. Yushu looked at her sad and sorrowful appearance and couldn't bear to see her like this. She promised, "Don't worry and go. As long as I am alive, I will think of a way to let you and His Majesty reunite." In the 6th month, the huge capital was half empty. The whole city was desolate. Most of the common people had fled. Half of the civil and military officials had resigned. The rest either didn't want to leave or couldn't. The Great Yan's cavalry trampled over Hebei and headed straight for the capital. They advanced triumphantly and finally arrived at the city in the middle of summer. Emperor Chongzhen put on his armor and led 3,000 imperial guards to the city gate to meet the enemy. But he was surrounded. When Yushu heard the news, she immediately summoned the Celestial Commissioner and 500 elite black-robed guards to rescue the emperor. Unfortunately, they were one step too late. The Yan army broke through the gates of the capital at lightning speed and captured Emperor Chongzhen, who was personally leading the army into the war. The sun set. The black-robed guards killed their way to the foot of the city gate and fell into the enemy's formation. Yushu sat stiffly in the carriage. She heard a shout coming from not far away. "Who are you? Tell me your name." She took a deep breath and answered with a loud voice, "The Celestial Commissioner of Dan Dynasty has given me some advice." Not long after, there was a commotion outside. She heard a loud voice from the top of the city gate. "Are you the Celestial Commissioner who has given me some advice? I am Lu Shining, the Prince of Chongping of Great Yan." Chapter 8:14. I am Lu Shining, the Prince of Chongping of the Yan Kingdom. After being separated for 5 years, Yushu had once imagined what sort of situation it would be when she reunited with Shui Rui, and meeting him in battle under the gazes of everyone was the situation she was most unwilling to see. Looking at her lover on the tower, Yushu's eyes flashed. She could not look away and could not suppress the palpitation in her heart. She suppressed the desire in her heart and walked out of the carriage with a cold face. In front of her was the dark muzzle of a cannon not far away. Behind her was the long street stained with blood. Hundreds of black-robed guards protected her in the middle. Flames flickered in Shui Rui's eyes. He had an extremely good field of vision from where he was. The smoke in the surroundings had dispersed, and he could clearly see her appearance. His greedy gaze swept past her from head to toe, and his heartbeat that had long since become numb due to the constant battles instantly became lively. Lovesickness that corroded his bones overflowed from his limbs and bones, and he wished for nothing more than to leap down from the tower and fiercely rub her into his embrace. "So it's Prince of Chongping." Yushu raised her voice and said, "I've heard so much about you." It was as if they had never met before. Shui Rui's breathing froze as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on him, causing him to sober up from the pleasant surprise of their reunion, and he realized that they were enemies. He lowered his eyes and restrained the burning desire in his eyes, yet he still stared fixedly at her, and then he cleared his throat and said in a low voice, "The Emperor of Da'an has been captured by me. I advise you to surrender now." Hearing his words, the burly man who had previously blocked the black-robed guard's path spurred his horse forward and thrust his spear forward. With a ferocious expression he said to Yushu, "I don't care what you're talking about. In front of our Grand Marshal, you're not even worth mentioning. If you know what's good for you, surrender obediently. Otherwise you'll die." As soon as he finished speaking, the well-trained elites of the Yan Kingdom pointed their sharp blades at Yushu's carriage in unison. The archers on the city tower drew their bows and aimed the arrows at her head. For a moment the atmosphere was tense, and a murderous aura rushed toward her. Shui Rui had a headache. He saw that Yushu's expression was getting colder and colder. He quickly stopped them. "Xiaoliao, don't be rude. The great teacher is the chief of the Book of Changes in the world, it is only right to respect him." This sentence determined the identity of Yushu. It avoided the important and focused on the trivial. It did not mention that she was an important minister of the imperial court, but only talked about her academic status. Xiaoliao put down his spear and pointed at Yushu, asking in a low, muffled voice, "What is Shui? Is this woman more powerful than the imperial advisor? You're just bluffing." Before Shui Rui could pull a long face, hundreds of black-robed guards had already drawn their swords and pointed them at Xiaoliao. Their imposing manner was overwhelming, and they were glaring at Xiaoliao with an expression that said, "How dare you humiliate us? You're courting death." Yushu said expressionlessly, "A scholar can be killed but not humiliated." Xiaoliao, stand down. Shui Rui's face darkened. Xiaoliao did not know how to read people's expressions at a critical moment. He really needed to teach him a lesson later. Xiaoliao felt very innocent after being scolded. He lowered his head and retreated to the side. He secretly looked at Yushu and thought, this woman has fair skin and long legs. Her appearance is not bad. Could it be that His Highness has taken a fancy to her? Otherwise, why would he be so fierce? Shui Rui looked at Yushu and said with a serious expression, I have no intention of humiliating you, but the imperial court has already lost its power, and it's of no use no matter how you struggle. Not to mention your emperor is in my hands now. His last sentence was obviously a threat. Yushu smiled coldly, what do you want? Tell your men to put down their weapons. I promise in the name of Changping that I will not kill a single one of your men. Yushu stared at him for a moment. She raised her hand and pressed down. The black-robed guards around hesitated for a moment and then threw their weapons on the ground. They gave up resisting. This showed her prestige. Shui Rui secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He ordered his subordinate, send the commander back to my tent. Yushu did not say a word and turned back to the carriage. She allowed the Yen soldiers to separate her from the black-robed guards. They then sent her and the carriage to the camp outside the city. As for Shui Rui, he stayed behind to arrange the troops and entered the capital. When Jiang Huaying became the emperor of Ningdong City, he had 100,000 soldiers under his command. This number was not complete. Later, the Yen army conquered the city and expanded their army. Within 5 years, they took in another 100,000 soldiers. Many of them were surrendered soldiers of the Yin dynasty. Prince Changping led 50,000 elite vanguards into the city. The Godly Machine Battalion's thunder fire cannon blasted open the gate of Anling City. Then Emperor Chongzhen walked into the trap and became a hostage. The 20,000 imperial guards in the city surrendered and were forced to hand over the commander's seal. The 4 city gates of Anling were sealed by the Yen army. People were only allowed to enter but not leave. They blocked the escape routes of the officials and nobles in the capital city and arrested them one by one. The first to be arrested were Duke Jing, Count Zhongyong and the other senior officials. Apart from their family members, all the officials above the 5th rank were not spared. They were all thrown into the Supreme Court's prison temporarily occupied. Only Grand Tutor Yin, who left the capital 2 years ago, escaped. After a series of meticulous arrangements, Prince Changping calmly led a large group of people into the palace. A month ago, the 2 empresses of the West Palace and the empress went to the palace in Luoyang to seek refuge. They took away the crown prince, Lu Ying, who was hastily crowned by Emperor Chongzhen. At the moment, there were no important people in the harem except a few unfavored concubines. Moreover, Emperor Chongzhen left the city to fight the enemy and took away most of the imperial guards. The imperial guards inside and outside the palace were no match for the elites of the Yen kingdom. At night, the palace lanterns were lit. In the Fengqing Palace, which was used for grand ceremonies, Shui Rui stood sideways in the empty main hall. Half of his body was shrouded in darkness and his face could not be seen clearly. Below him were a group of trembling concubines. There were also a few palace maids and eunuchs of high status. They were all just captured from the harem. 5 years ago, Shui Rui was one of the few young talents in the capital. He went to the court and there were many people in the palace who had seen the eldest son of the Shui family. It was a pity that he had been fighting outside all these years. His handsome face was no longer smooth and tender, and it had a thin layer of honey color. His facial features had become more and more profound, and even his figure had become tall and mighty. With a suit of armor on his body, he didn't have the slightest appearance of a distinguished and elegant young master in the past. Thus for a moment no one recognized him. On the way here, this group of people from the harem had witnessed the ferocious appearance of the soldiers of the Yen kingdom chopping up the imperial guards as if they were slicing watermelons, and they'd long since been scared out of their wits. At this moment they didn't even dare to take another glance at Shui Rui. They only felt that this general of the Yen kingdom before them was a living king of hell, and he could possibly make their heads roll to the ground at any moment. There were even a few useless people who wet themselves on the spot, causing a wave of urine to emit from their bodies, and a puddle of wet marks appeared beneath their feet. Shui Rui frowned slightly and asked his subordinates, "Are there only these few people left in the harem?" "Your Highness, we've searched everywhere. They're all here." A eunuch rolled his eyes and knelt 2 steps forward. As he kowtowed, he stammered, Your Highness, I know that the 2 Empress Dowagers and the Empress have gone to Luoyang Palace to seek refuge. The Crown Prince has also been taken away. Emperor Chongzhen had been on the throne for less than 5 years. He only had 2 sons and 1 daughter. The crown prince and the eldest princess were born by Empress Xiaojiang, and the second prince was born by concubine Mei. As he spoke, the eunuch pointed to the beautiful woman in palace attire who was being supported by 2 palace maids. This concubine Mei is the emperor's favorite concubine. If you capture her, the emperor will definitely be wary. He then pointed to another pale concubine and said, "This is concubine Rui Shu. Her father is an elder in the court, Count Zhongyong. If you capture her, you don't have to worry about her father disobeying you." That is the chief eunuch Jia Feng, an old servant of the emperor. He is in charge of half of the affairs in the palace, and most of the key to the treasury is with him. If you don't believe me, you can ask someone to search for him. These people in the palace had no idea that the emperor had fallen into the hands of Shui Rui, and the capital city was already surrounded by the great Yan's army. Therefore this eunuch thought he was smart and sold out the few masters in the harem, hoping to save his own life. Who would have thought that the living king of hell only glanced at him indifferently, waved his hand and said, "You talk too much. Drag him out and behead him." Then, before he could even cry out for mercy, his mouth was gagged and dragged out, becoming a ghost under the saber. The rest of the people felt their hatred vented, but at the same time, they were filled with fear, fearing that they would be the next one to be dragged out. No one wanted to die. Immediately, someone came up with an idea and said in a trembling voice, "Although I live deep in the palace, I have heard of the great name of Prince Chongping of the Yan Kingdom. Seeing you today, you really live up to your reputation. I believe that a man like you would not make a move on a few weak women, right?" The one who spoke was concubine Rui Shu, the head of the 4 concubines in the harem. She plucked up her courage and looked at the prince of the kingdom of Yan, trying to make herself more confident. But when she saw his face, she couldn't help but exclaim, "What? How could this prince of Chongping have such a face? He looked so much like someone she knew." She suddenly recalled the case of the Shui family's rebellion that caused a stir a few years ago. It was caused by the imperial envoy's secret visit to Ningdong City, where he saw the long-lost young master of the Shui family as the guest of the traitor, Prince of Dongjing. You are not Shui. Concubine Rui Shu couldn't finish her sentence, as if she had seen a ghost. Shui Rui didn't panic at being recognized. Concubine Rui had some history with him, and they could be considered as old acquaintances. But it wasn't worth it for him to be soft-hearted. He broke into the palace with his troops in the middle of the night, not to show off, nor for the gold and silver, but for the sons of Emperor Chongzhen. Before he sent out his troops, the imperial advisor had divined that there was a hidden dragon in the harem of the kingdom of Yan. He predicted that there would be a son who would restore the previous dynasty. The imperial advisor had repeatedly urged him to find this child, in case the wildfire was not extinguished. Unfortunately, he found nothing. Lock them up together and keep a close watch. Shui Rui passed down the order, left a group of troops and left the palace in a hurry. He didn't see the beauty behind him fall to the ground and stare blankly at his receding figure. Outside the palace, Xiao Liao followed closely behind him. Seeing that he still wanted to leave the city so late at night, he couldn't help but say, "Your Highness, the sky is dark. Why don't we rest here for the night and return to the camp tomorrow morning?" Shui Rui stopped and turned back to ask him, "You want to stay in the palace for the night?" Xiao Liao scratched the hair on his forehead and said with a silly smile, "I haven't slept in the palace before. This is the place where the emperor lives." "Since you know this is the place where the emperor lives, you still dare to sleep." The whip in Shui Rui's hand unceremoniously lashed on the horse's rein. Seeing the horse galloping away, Sha Erlung let out a ghostly howl. "Ah!" Shui Rui couldn't help but laugh. He urged the horse under his crotch to rush in the direction of the city gate. Chapter 8:15. It was a cool summer night in the wilderness. The Yan army's camp was just 50 miles east of Anling. It would only take 2 hours to go back and forth on horseback. At this moment, Yu Shu was in the commander's camp. Chongping Prince's subordinates had placed her in a temporary tent and sent soldiers to guard the door to prevent her from leaving. She did not walk around casually. She just sat quietly on the simple wooden bed and closed her eyes to rest. For today she had already thought of a perfect plan. Lu Hong and Su Qing each led a team of black-robed guards. One team hid around Baochang Street to protect her family in case of chaos in the city. The other team stayed behind to guard the Celestial Commissioner. Lone Swan secretly followed behind her, waiting for her signal. Once the situation changed, she could escape at any time. She could not be blamed for being so cautious.
Xia Jiangmin's nightmare foretold her death, so she had to be on guard. In the middle of the night, she heard the rustling of footsteps. Yu Shu opened her eyes. A moment later, she heard someone standing outside the tent shouting, "His Highness has returned to the camp. Please come with me." Yu Shu stood up and slowly tidied up her appearance. She smoothed out the creases in her skirt, gathered up her lapels and gently combed her hair. Then, she hid her slightly trembling fingers in her wide sleeves and slowly walked out. "Lead the way." The guard had been instructed in advance, so he did not dare to neglect her. He secretly glanced at her and took a torch to light the way. He reminded her kindly, "There are potholes on the ground. Please be careful of your steps." "Thank you." Yu Shu nodded slightly. She was a man of few words. She appropriately showed the restraint that a helpless and captured minister of a subjugated country should have. After walking for more than 100 steps, they met two groups of patrolling guards. They came to the outside of a large tent. The guard who led the way for her reported inside. When he heard the response from inside, he retreated and let her enter alone. "Please come in, Your Highness." Yu Shu's footsteps paused for a moment. She folded her sleeves in front of her abdomen and strode into the tent. The curtain closed behind her. Suddenly, she felt a ball of light in front of her. She raised her head and saw a man sitting under the lamp. His eyes were bright and full of expression as he stared at her. His handsome face was a little darker than she remembered, but his eyes had not changed. They were still bright and sincere, giving her the illusion that these 5 years of separation was just a dream. When she woke up from the dream, he had never left. Yu Shu's apprehensive heart suddenly calmed down. She lightly pursed her lips, and just as she was about to speak, she saw the person in front of her move. In the blink of an eye, a shadow covered the sky and covered the earth. When she came back to her senses, she was already tightly wrapped in a pair of iron arms against his broad chest. The tight embrace made it hard for her to breathe, let alone speak half a word. "Ashu, Ashu." Shui Rue called her name softly over and over again, and his throat was filled with thick feelings that could not be melted away. Even the moment he breached the gates of the capital city and captured the Dayan Emperor wasn't as joyous and excited as this moment when he regained what he had lost. Yu Shu could not stop smiling. She raised the corner of her mouth and silently twisted her neck. Naturally, she rested her head on his shoulder and eavesdropped on his heartbeat. After a while, Shui Rue realized that she was silent. Only then did he loosen her a little. Looking down at her, the first thing he saw was the red mark on her eyebrows. Then he saw her calm expression. It was hard to tell whether she was happy or angry. He suddenly felt that something was wrong, but he was not willing to let go of her. Instead, he hesitantly asked, "Are you not happy?" Yu Shu coldly snorted and raised her head to look at him. "What is there to be happy about? I am an important official of the imperial court and you are a general of the enemy country. You broke through my capital gates, captured the emperor and kidnapped me here. Aren't you trying to humiliate me?" Shui Rue was stunned for a moment. He was at a loss and said, "Ah Shu, how can you say that? Do you have some misunderstanding towards me? Didn't we agree that I will come back to pick you up and marry you openly? Don't tell me you have forgotten?" As he said this, his heart turned cold. He recalled her cold and distant appearance at the city gates in the evening. His big hand grabbed her shoulder and turned her around. He touched the back of her neck. "Could it be that you were also hit by the silver needles and lost your memory?" Yu Shu shrunk her neck and slapped his hand away. She turned her head to hold back her laughter and said sarcastically, "Who would have thought that the famous Prince of Chongping is actually a madman with a mouth full of nonsense? When did I get to know you and when did I ever have an engagement with you?" Hearing this, Shui Rue felt dizzy and his ears were ringing. He felt that even if the sky fell down, it would be nothing more than this. Yu Shu seized the opportunity to push him away. She took 2 steps inside and started sizing up the spacious bedchamber. She was stepping on a half-old felt carpet, and a simple long table was neatly stacked with military reports and texts. Brush, ink, paper and inkstone were all present, and there were a few candlesticks. However, she couldn't see a tea table or incense table, and there wasn't even an incense burner. The bed not far away was also made of ordinary wood. Other than the armor on the clothes rack, there was only a set of travel clothes. It could be seen that Shui Rue, the Grand Marshal who led the troops, lived a rather poor life. It was rumored that the Yen army was thrifty but they did not rob or plunder the people's wealth. It turned out to be true. On the other side, Shui Rue recovered from his shock, and he stared at Yu Shu's back once more before he felt that something was off.
Even if she's lost her memories, isn't she a little too calm? Ah Shu. Yu Shu was lamenting the hard life of the prince of the Great Yen when she suddenly heard him calling her from behind. She answered subconsciously and was immediately hugged by him from behind, causing her back to hurt. She heard him whispering into her ear through clenched teeth, don't worry, you heartless liar. How dare you tease me like this? I missed you so much that I missed you so much. I only hate myself for coming late. I really want to dig out my heart and show it to you so that you don't torture me anymore. He had not said sweet words for a long time, but when he saw her, he couldn't help himself. If his subordinates in the army heard these words, they would think that their prince of Chongping was possessed by a playboy. Yu Shu snickered endlessly in her heart. Her grand insight technique had already reached perfection, so how could she be unable to discern whether what he said was the truth or a lie? She was only deliberately putting on a cold face for him to see how sincere he was. You only say that you missed me. Do you think I'm living well? These 5 years are neither long nor short. Without a few words from you, how would I know if you have a change of heart? I can only predict your safety every day, but I can't feel at ease. She sighed and made his heart wrench. He hugged her tightly and said, if I have a change of heart, I will be struck by lightning. Yu Shu smiled, I will remember this. If you go back on your words, I will cast a spell to summon lightning to strike you. When she laughed, Shui Rui laughed along with her, and his arms slid down to hold her hand before leading her to sit on the long couch. After that, he turned around to retrieve the candlestick and placed it at the head of the bed before bending his knees and half kneeling before her. He held her hands together in his palms and raised his head, and his burning gaze descended onto her face. Let me take a good look. Yu Shu smiled and let him look at her. Her palms gradually became wet with sweat, but she didn't want to pull away. They looked at each other in a daze as if they wanted to make up for the thousands of days and nights that had passed. The night candle was yellow. At first, Shui Rui thought that the fireball between her eyebrows was a meticulously painted flower. His heart moved and he raised his hand to touch it. However, when his fingertips touched the protruding cinnabar, he was shocked to find that it was a bone-deep scar. He lost his smile and held her tightly with his other hand. He said with a trembling voice, you have suffered. In the past 5 years, in order to not implicate Yu Shu and prevent her from being caught, he often asked Jin Ku to go to the capital to inquire about her news even though he didn't send a word. He knew that she almost married Jing Chen. He knew when she was promoted. He knew that she took over the position of Celestial Commissioner from Zhu Muzhao. He even knew that she adopted an unknown adopted son. Naturally, he also knew that she went to kidnap the bride and was captured by his grandfather. She was tortured in the prison of the Ministry of Justice and later escaped from death. Jin Ku had seen Yu Shu several times from a distance. He didn't see the scar on her forehead, so he thought that the rumors about her disfigurement were false. When he replied to Shui Rui, he lightly mentioned a rumor. When he saw her today, Shui Rui knew that it wasn't a rumor. He was used to all kinds of punishments when he was in the Supreme Court. At a glance, he knew that she had been tortured in the death prison. Her skull was pierced by the soul-luring awl, which was why she had such an unforgettable scar. Yu Shu was telepathically connected with him. She didn't need to explain more. She asked him in reply, don't you hate me for harming the Shui family? Don't you hate me for relying on the enemy who killed your father? If he had any hesitation, he wouldn't be worthy of her entrusting her life to him. Have you forgotten that it was me who taught you to do everything possible to save your life? How can I hate you? Shui Rui seemed to have seen through the knot in her heart. He clasped his fingers with hers and said softly, I'm thankful that you can live well. Moreover, Shui Lingnan brought this upon himself. If it wasn't for Yu Shu's drastic measures, the Shui family's fate would be even more miserable. Yu Shu's heart tightened and then relaxed. Her eyes quickly regained their vigor. She secretly thought that this person had never disappointed her. He was really an ideal husband. She cleared her throat and said, don't worry. I've secretly brought Aunt Shui and Sister Jean Sun out of the clean water nunnery on Mount Amei. They are now living in a quiet place. When you have settled down here, I'll bring them back to reunite with you. Shui Rui looked ashamed. My son is really unfilial. Fortunately, I have you to help me. As for Shui Lingnan, he died in prison in the 3rd year of Chongzhen. Since she did not mention this, he did not ask again. Yu Shu saw that his legs were numb from squatting. She pulled his hand and made him sit on the bed. She sat down with him and had a long talk. The two of them talked for half the night. They talked about the past and poured out their hearts. At dawn, Yu Shu unknowingly fell asleep in Shui Rui's arms.
All these years she had always been a light sleeper, so even the slightest movement of grass in the wind would wake her up. At this time the officers and soldiers in the camp had woken up early to train. Shouts of orders came from afar, accompanied by the sound of clashing weapons and the sound of drums. In such a chaotic environment she actually slept exceptionally well. Shui Rui saw that she did not show any signs of waking up. He carefully withdrew his arm. He was not greedy for this moment of warmth. There were indeed many things waiting for him to personally arrange. While she was sleeping he could do it. When she woke up he could accompany her. Shui Rui did not summon any guards. He quietly dressed himself and walked out of the tent. He put on a stern face and ordered his guards to not allow anyone to trespass. Regarding last night's incident, if there is any criticism, he will be severely punished. Chapter 8:16. For the first few days the city of Enling was in a state of panic. The people did not leave their houses and the gates were tightly shut, fearing that the invading Yan army would loot and burn the people. The families of the officials were in an even worse situation. The heads of the families were captured in the middle of the night, and no one knew if they were dead or alive. Then they heard that the emperor had been captured by the Yan army. The country was about to fall and there was nothing they could do. Many people were unwilling to die just like that. They packed their belongings overnight and wanted to sneak out of the city with a group of guards. However, before they could even touch the city gate, they were captured by the patrolling soldiers of the Yan kingdom and sent back home. In short, they could not escape even if they had wings. Speaking of which, when Shui Rui captured hundreds of court officials and threw them into prison, he did not yell at them. Instead, he waited for the emperor of Great Yan to enter the city, and then he would ask for the emperor's judgment. These days, he had been running between the city and the outside, and he was so busy that his feet did not touch the ground. He was busy during the day, but every evening he would return to the camp to spend the night, just for a moment of reunion. Seeing that he was tired from running back and forth, Yu Shu suggested, "Why don't I go back to the city first so you don't have to do this?" Shui Rui shook his head and said, "No. That day I captured you in front of everyone so that you can earn a good reputation for risking your life to save the emperor. If you go back now, all your efforts will be in vain." He imprisoned Yu Shu here, not entirely out of selfishness but more for her future. Although Great Yan came with great momentum and conquered half of the country in one go, it was not easy to conquer and even harder to defend. It was child's play to rule the country with a group of military officers. When Great Yan moved the capital to Enling in the future, they would need to make use of those civil officials. Coercion and temptation were one of the reasons, but the key was to set a standard, a leader, so that those officials could serve Great Yan honestly. And Yu Shu could do just that. Shui Rui did not want her to bear the infamy of a slave with two surnames, so he had to strike first, firmly stamping the word loyalty on her. Even if she were to submit to Great Yan in the future, no one would be able to point fingers at her. "I have already arranged everything." He took her hand, his rough fingers caressing her soft fingertips. He lightly said, "I will ask Jun Shang to spare Emperor Chongzhen's life and imprison him in Jing City as a hostage. You, on the other hand, were forced to serve the imperial court." He had even thought of an escape route for her. Yu Shu did not have to worry at all. She smiled and asked him, "Have you ever thought that I might not be willing to enter the court as an official?" Shui Rui looked up at her, trying to figure out if she was joking or if she was speaking from the bottom of her heart. "If you don't want to, then just pretend that I didn't say anything." Behind his conniving tone was incomparable confidence. Today he could finally protect her. Yu Shu looked into his gentle eyes and her heart was moved. She stretched out her slender fingers and intertwined them together. She gripped them tightly and said with a determined expression, "The power that I have worked so hard to obtain, how can I just give it to someone else?" She was tired of the deceit in the imperial court, tired of the endless scheming. But if she could advance hand in hand with him, wouldn't it be a happy thing? It was time for a new beginning for this decaying country. In the 7th month, the Great Yan Emperor entered the pass. On the 12th day he arrived at the east of Enling. Changping Wang ordered his subordinates to open the city gates, sent more soldiers and personally went out of the city to receive the emperor. Banners fluttered in the wind, welcoming the imperial entourage. The Yan emperor was clad in iron armor, riding on the back of a horse with a glowing face. He brought a group of personal attendants with him, not showing any signs of hardship from the journey. "Subject Brother Kowtows and salute to Jun Shang. Fortunately, I did not disappoint you and have taken the capital. Long live the emperor." Shui Rui flipped off the horse, cupped his fists and half-kneeled. Behind him, countless soldiers knelt down in unison. The noise was overwhelming. Long live the emperor! Ha ha ha! The Yen emperor laughed loudly and immediately jumped off the horse. He walked forward and helped Shui Rui up with one hand. He patted his shoulder hard and said in a loud voice, "Well done. I will remember your great merit." There was a smile in Shui Rui's eyes. He was not arrogant, but he did not decline either. No matter how many people felt uncomfortable when the emperor said this, he was definitely going to take the position of the greatest contributor to the founding of the country. Then, the imperial entourage entered the capital and went straight to the palace. Along the way, the extravagant and magnificent scenery dazzled the group of generals who were born in a bitter and cold place. They had never seen glazed roofs and gold-painted walls. They had never seen white jade steps and jeweled corridors. Walking and stopping, they came to the dazzling palace. Everyone looked at the high dragon throne, and even the Yen emperor could not hide the excitement on his face. He took a deep breath, crossed several steps, and could not wait to sit on the dragon throne. Seeing this, everyone knelt down and shouted, "Long live the emperor!" The Yen emperor was greatly delighted. He waved his hand grandly to dismiss the crowd of officials from the formalities. Suppressing his agitated feelings, he called Shui Rui forward and asked, "Where is an emperor now?" There was not a single emperor who was not worried about his predecessor when the dynasty was about to change. "He is imprisoned in the camp." Someone said in a rough voice, "Why not kill him quickly?" Shui Rui glanced at the boorish man and turned to report to the emperor, "I have something to say." The Yen emperor was amiable to him. "Speak your mind." Shui Rui first brought up the matter of moving the capital before discussing the governance of the country. He proposed to use Emperor Chongzhen as a hostage to subdue the officials of the previous dynasty. Once this was said, there were many voices of opposition. They felt that he was nurturing a tiger and inviting trouble. Shui Rui did not argue with these simple-minded warriors. He said to the emperor, "Founding a country is based on manpower. Governing a country is based on the hearts of the people. The emperor has already obtained the world. All the people of the Yen kingdom are your people. Why distinguish between the previous dynasty and the current one?" The Yen emperor was wise. He knew that Shui Rui's suggestion was the most practical. He had just obtained the world and did not lack troops. But the court lacked manpower. If he wanted to settle down quickly and prevent chaos among the people, he could only use the officials of the previous dynasty. Royal brother's words are reasonable. I will leave this matter to you. The Yen emperor was born in a military family. He had a decisive personality and did not go back on his word. Disregarding the grumbling of those below him, he immediately ordered Shui Rui to pick some useful people. There was only one additional sentence. "Those who are willing to be used by me, stay. Those who are not, kill them." Shui Rui accepted the decree and said, "There are still people in the Chongzhen imperial harem. Please decide whether to stay or leave." He was obviously reminding the emperor that there was still a group of women in the imperial harem that had not been dealt with. To kill or to keep, it was up to you. The Yen emperor had an embarrassed expression. He waved his hand and said, "The Empress Dowager's carriage is still on the way and will arrive in a few days. I have no wife or daughter. Let's wait for Mother and the princess to enter the capital first." Lady Wei had been promoted to Empress Dowager. There was also Jiang Mia, the eldest princess. To the Yen emperor, the matters of the imperial harem should be managed by women. He was too lazy to worry about it. After days of traveling, he was tired after the excitement. After discussing a few more matters, the Yen emperor dismissed everyone to rest for a while before making plans. After he left the palace, Shui Rui was surrounded by a group of people, and they congratulated him and inquired about him in succession. All of their words were filled with the same concern. Where would their group stay in the future? Luckily, Shui Rui was prepared. He took out a map from his sleeve unhurriedly and spread it on the ground. It was a bird's-eye view of Enling City. He pointed at a dozen places and said, "Earlier, some officials and rich merchants fled at the sight of the wind. There are many empty houses in the capital. You can go take a look first. After I report to the emperor, I will let you move." Only then was everyone satisfied. They asked for the map and swarmed to look at the houses. They were afraid that if they were late, the good places would be taken away by others. Chapter 8:17. Shui Rui had a list of officials that he thought could be reused. There were more than 100 of them. He did not waste time trying to persuade them one by one. Instead, he divided them into 3 groups and brought them to the court of the Supreme Court. The first group of people did not have high positions. Disregarding their abilities, the Ministry of Appointments had recorded excellent results every year. They could be considered as an influential force in the court. The dozens of people were shackled to the court. Their faces were covered in dust and their hearts were filled with fear. They were afraid that their death was near. They looked up at the sky and saw a lone armchair in the middle of the court. On it sat a man wearing a tight robe and soft armor. He had a white feather crown on his head. His skin was the color of bronze and his eyes were bright. He looked like a heavenly soldier who had descended to the mortal world. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. Some of them felt that the noble from the Yen kingdom looked familiar, but they couldn't remember who he looked like. They saw the burly general who was standing at the side take a step forward and say in a tiger's voice, "You sinners! The person in the court is Prince of Chongping of the Yen kingdom. Kneel down and kowtow." His voice was like a lion's roar. The officials were frightened. Some of them knelt down immediately. Some of them had a backbone and did not make a sound. Shui Rui glanced at their faces and gestured for Xiao Liao to step aside. He said, "Since ancient times the winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. The previous emperor was incompetent. He could not defend against foreign enemies and abandoned his loyal subjects. He disobeyed the teachings of the ancestors and did not care about the people. It is heaven's will that the Yen kingdom will replace him." He paused for a moment and changed his sitting position. He leaned forward and said, "However, my lord is broad-minded and tolerant. Although you captured Emperor Chongzhen alive, you spared his life. This is the grace of not killing him. As for you sinners, if you want to keep your lives, the only way is to abandon the darkness and join the light." As soon as he finished, everyone's expression changed. Although some of them were tempted, no one made a sound. Firstly, they did not want to be known as a coward. Secondly, they were afraid that this was a test. No one wanted to be the first to stand out. "Everyone, don't listen to this scoundrel's lies." Surprisingly, there was also a donkey who was not afraid of death. He stretched out his head to take the birdshot and shouted with a red face and neck, "Prince of Dongjing is treacherous and heinous. He plotted to usurp the throne and everyone has the right to punish him. What do you mean by forsaking the dark for the light? I think you are clearly trying to frame me for being disloyal and unjust. I Chai would rather die than surrender. If you have the ability, then kill me." Shui Rui sized him up and asked, "Are you not afraid of death?" That person raised his head. "What is there to be afraid of? What courage!" Shui Rui praised him indifferently, and before this person could reveal a complacent expression and speak a few more ruthless words, Shui Rui lightly waved his hand and ordered, "Drag him out and behead him in public." Then, everyone saw that Chai, who was acting righteously just a moment ago, was grabbed by the neck by the soldiers. He could not struggle and was dragged out like a dead dog. Just outside the court, a knife was raised and blood spurted out like a fountain. The fresh head rolled on the ground and the remaining half of the body twitched a few times before it stopped moving. This scene happened too fast, so fast that no one could react in time. The few officials standing near the door were sprayed with blood and fell to the ground, shaking like a sieve. Looking at the headless corpse on the ground, it was as if they had seen their own deaths. Some of them even beat their chests and vomited on the spot, spitting out a puddle of filth, and a strong stench filled the air. "Who else wants to die? Come out now and I will fulfill your wish." Shui Rui did not even frown as he coldly looked at everyone in the court. There was dead silence and no one made a sound. If there were people who thought that this Prince of Yen would not kill them all and wanted to be a hero, then after seeing their colleague being beheaded, the courage in their hearts instantly disappeared and only fear was left. Who would want to die when there was a way to live? Is there no one else? Shui Rui asked once more, and when he saw they were sensible, he nodded in satisfaction and said, "That's right. Don't think too highly of yourself. It doesn't matter if you're here or not in this world. Even if you die just like this, the history books won't record you. What is loyalty and what is disloyalty? Learn from your celestial commissioner. You can risk your life to save the emperor and also endure humiliation. I admire you. Saying a few words here isn't loyalty, it's stupidity." They were scared and said what needed to be said. Shui Rui did not waste any more words and gave the final ultimatum. "I will let you go home today. Go back and think about it. 3 days later, whoever thinks it through can write a letter of recommendation and present it to me." One moment it was hell and the next moment it was heaven. The dynasty officials were scared out of their wits, but when they heard that the Prince of Yen was going to let them go home, they were all stunned. Only when the soldiers came to unshackle them did they realize that he was really going to let them go home. Thank the heavens they were saved. May I ask your highness to tell me where you will be staying? Someone asked. Shui Rui flicked his fingers and thought of the few empty mansions and villas in the capital. He said, I will be staying at Dingbo Mansion. The Dingbo Mansion was built in a unique style and had the reputation of being the #1 mansion in Anling. It was originally a mansion given to the Xiang prince by Emperor Zhao Qing. Later on, when Emperor Chongzhen succeeded to the throne, the Xiang prince was caught plotting a rebellion and ended up committing suicide in prison. Since he was already dead, the family property was naturally confiscated. Emperor Chongzhen was stingy with this mansion and could not bear to give it to anyone else. Therefore, the Dingbo mansion was left empty until now. Shui Rui vaguely remembered Yushu praising the beauty of the mansion. After letting the first group of people go, Shui Rui met the other two groups of officials. His second group of people were mostly his old acquaintances. For example, the Chancellor of the Supreme Court, Guo Huaiyan, used to be his superior, and he also had a good relationship with the Shui family. He had to give him a way out, he couldn't force him to die in one go. Since they were old friends, how could they not recognize him? Even though his appearance has changed, there were still people who called out Shui Rui's name with a look of disbelief. Yet Shui Rui had made up his mind not to acknowledge him, and his expression didn't change in the slightest. My name is Lu Shining and I'll never change my name or my surname. I don't know who this Shui Rui you're talking about is, but I presume his face is extremely similar to mine. Guo Huaiyan was standing right below, and he was less than 3 m away from Shui Rui. He clearly recognized that it was Shui Rui, and a tempestuous storm instantly arose in his heart. When he heard Shui Rui deny it yet didn't believe him, he couldn't help but say, the Shui family is a relative of the emperor. A few years ago, the imperial court sent an imperial envoy to Ningdong City to denounce them. They found that the eldest son of the Shui family, who had been missing for a long time, had become a guest of the Prince of Dongjing. Therefore, the whole family was implicated. Have you not heard of it? Guo Huaiyan's words had a hidden meaning. He was obviously blaming Shui Rui. The main culprit of the Shui family's disaster was him. Shui Rui said calmly, I'm not acquainted with that Shui clan young master at all, and there were indeed many people that mistook me for him. I presume that imperial envoy was mistaken all those years ago and mistook Li Kuei for Li Gui. His heart was as clear as a mirror. How could he be swayed by 1 or 2 words from others? When the Celestial Commissioner chose Lu Tan to succeed the throne, he would definitely not allow the Shui family to grow. Moreover, Shui Lingnan was secretly colluding with the Prince of Xiang. Even if he did not do this, the Shui family was destined to fall. Fortunately, Yushu helped him and saved the lives of his mother and younger sister. This is the best outcome. Guo Huaiyan sighed to himself. He knew that Shui Rui would not admit his identity. Therefore he did not continue to pester him. Shui Lingnan is already dead. There is no point in arguing about this. So I was mistaken. Upon closer inspection, there is some difference between His Highness and the eldest son of the Shui family. Guo Huaiyan was Shui Rui's former superior. Even he said that he was mistaken. Even if the others had doubts, they swallowed it back into their stomachs. Shui Rui cleared his throat and returned to the main topic, talking about the amnesty. This time, no one jumped out to be a hero and scolded the yen traders. But this group of people are obviously tougher than the previous group. Even if they are afraid of death, it is not written on their faces. Among them, Guo Huaiyan is the most respected. He was the first to express his opinion. I am old and have the intention to retire. I am afraid I will not be able to serve your country. I hope that His Highness will be merciful and allow me to retire. This time Shui Rui did not threaten to kill them. Instead he tried to persuade them to stay. Guo Huaiyan was adamant. He did not force him and said, how about this? Everyone can go home first and think about it. This prince will wait for the good news. Finishing his words, he let them go. The last group of people are not many. They are either relatives of the emperor or nobles. Duke Jing and Count Zhongyong are among them. There are also a few new nobles who were promoted during the Chongzhen era. They did not even enjoy 2 years of wealth before they became prisoners. They were left at the end because Shui Rui has no intention to recruit them. Duke Jing and Count Zhongyong looked as if they have seen a ghost. But no one dared to ask. Shui Rui's opening words are the same, winner takes all. Fate is in the hands of the heavens. Next he said what he has to say directly, originally all of you will die. But this dynasty has just been established and it is not advisable to kill too many people. I will give you a chance now. Go back to the prison and write a statement of your crimes. Also, list the mistakes of the previous dynasty. After His Majesty has reviewed it, you will be released. Shui Rui does not want to kill them all. But he will not leave a way out for them. A statement of their crimes will cut off all their hopes. Whether they live or die, it is up to them. The first two groups of people are released. The remaining people are once again locked up in the prison. This is also to make a comparison for those who were lucky enough to return home, to let them know their situation. After dealing with this important matter, Shui Rui entered the palace to report on his completion of the mission, and he mentioned the courtyard in passing to the Emperor of Yen. The Emperor of Yen was completely at ease with him, and he didn't ask about the details of the enlistment, and with a wave of his hand, he bestowed the Steadwave mansion to Shui Rui. In the end he asked Shui Rui, "How come I heard that you captured the previous dynasty's Grand Tidian and brought her to your camp? I even heard that the Grand Tidian is a beautiful woman. Second younger brother, tell me honestly what actually happened." Hearing this, Shui Rui immediately lifted his robe and knelt on the ground. His expression was solemn. "Allow this subject to report." The Yen Emperor was frightened by him. He hurriedly said, "Stand up and speak. Jin did not blame you." Shui Rui refused to stand up and insisted on kneeling to speak. The Yen Emperor could not do anything to him. He could only let him speak quickly. Speak. You are innocent. Tell your Majesty, this subject and the great Tidian Lady Yu have already pledged to marry 5 years ago. Shui Rui's gaze was firm as he looked at the ruler of the empire before him, and he revealed a pleading expression. "I don't ask for glory, splendor, wealth, and rank, but I hope that my lord will consider my contribution in founding the empire and grant this marriage." In other words, he did not need to be the prince of Chongping of the Yen kingdom. He did not want the position of being second to only one and above tens of thousands. He only wanted that woman. The Yen Emperor's eyes flickered. He frowned and asked him with a cold face, "It is just a woman. Is it worth it?" This subject has made up his mind. The Yen Emperor stared at him. Suddenly he laughed. He raised his hand and signaled him, "Stand up. I approve. You and I are emperor and subject in name. In reality we are brothers. Not to mention that you like an official of the previous dynasty. Even if you like a concubine of the previous dynasty, I will grant your wish. This subject thanks your Majesty for your kindness." Shui Rui kowtowed to express his gratitude. He stood up happily. The Yen Emperor smiled and said, "When the imperial preceptor enters the capital, I will decide your marriage." The imperial preceptor of the Yen kingdom, Lu Yen, was Yun Hua. Shui Rui got what he wanted. He took his leave with light footsteps. He did not see the Yen Emperor's thought-provoking gaze as he looked at his back. Since ancient times, heroes have a weakness for the charms of a beautiful woman. With such a temperament I can be at ease. The Yen Emperor muttered to himself. Suddenly he thought of something. He held his forehead and said, Chapter 8:18. When the Yen Emperor raised his army at Ningdong, he posthumously titled Xian Cao as Taizu, his mother Wei Shi as Empress Dowager, his sister Jiang Mia as Great Princess Royal. When Empress Dowager Wei was young, she had left her home to marry into Liaodong. Taizu was always on the campaign trail and died young. It was her mother who took the place of her father and raised a pair of children by herself. It could be said that Jiang Huaiying's path of imperial power was mostly due to her influence. Jiang Mia wasn't a normal woman. When the Yen Emperor expanded his territory and attacked the Central Plains, he had countless generals under his command. If Chongping Wang Lu Shining was first, then this Princess Royal's contributions were at least in the top 10. How many women in this world dared to charge into the front lines and kill the enemy on the battlefield? Jiang Mia wasn't good at leading troops, but in terms of bravery, no one could match her. Due to this, her reputation in the military was very high and she was highly respected. What was worth mentioning was that this female Luocha of high status had eyes at the top of her head and a fiery temper. She was over 25 but still unmarried. Empress Dowager Wei worried herself to death for her precious daughter's marriage. On the way to Jing, Empress Dowager Wei gave Jiang Mia a final ultimatum. "When we get to Enling, no matter what, you have to find me a Fuma to marry. If you still don't want to marry, I'll get your imperial brother to find you a beggar to live." Jiang Mia felt a headache when she heard her talk about this. She jumped off the carriage as though she was escaping. "I'm going outside to ride a horse for some fresh air. You can rest." Empress Dowager Wei was exasperated. After pausing for a while, she sent someone to invite the imperial tutor. The carriage was spacious and Empress Dowager Wei didn't have any reservations. When Lu Yen came, she led him into the carriage to talk. By now, everyone knew that the Yen country had an all-powerful imperial tutor. But other than the Yen emperor, very few people knew that he was the famous Yin Huaizi. Empress Dowager Wei was looking for him for an old matter. In the chaos of war, it wasn't good to consider relationships. Now that the world is settled, I have a matter that hasn't been resolved. I hope that the imperial tutor can fulfill it. Before Empress Dowager Wei spoke, Lu Yen had guessed what she was going to say. It was to be a matchmaker for the eldest princess, to propose marriage to his son. So he smiled but didn't speak. Using his hand as a pen, he dipped it in tea and wrote on the tea table, "Don't force it." His vocal cords were damaged so he wouldn't speak easily. Empress Dowager Wei glanced and grimaced. If it wasn't that Hualan, that girl is so stubborn, this old woman wouldn't have the face to ask for help. I'm afraid that if her heart is on Shining, she won't be able to get what she wants in the future, and will cause great trouble. Lu Yen shook his head. The roots of this disaster have long been planted, it cannot be avoided. Empress Dowager Wei was shocked. She knew that the imperial preceptor's divinations were all accurate and hurriedly asked, "Imperial preceptor, please speak." A match made in heaven. Lu Yen only wrote these 4 words before she cupped her hands and excused herself. Empress Dowager Wei couldn't keep him and could only watch as the line of water on the table disappeared, her brows furrowed in thought. A match made in heaven? Does this mean that Lu Shining already has a good marriage fate? Lu Yen returned to his carriage, shaking his head and sighing. Seeing this, Zhao Xiaozhu couldn't help but ask, "Ifu, what did the Empress Dowager say to you? Look at how worried you are." Lu Yen thought to herself, how could he not be worried? That clever son of his had an infatuated heart. He had long been deeply in love with that ill-fated little shimmy of his. But he had provoked the Princess Royal, this peach blossom, and buried the root of his disaster. A few days ago he had divined for Shui Rui. He had divined that he would have a calamity of love in the near future. If he could safely pass it, his path of love would naturally be smooth sailing. If he couldn't escape the calamity, he would end up a lonely man. He couldn't say it. He couldn't point it out to Empress Dowager Wei. Shui Rui and Jiang Mia had an ill-fated relationship. When the two met, it would be a miracle if they didn't become enemies. How could they be husband and wife? Just as Lu Yen was worrying, Empress Dowager Wei's carriage passed through Purple Thorn Pass and slowly entered the Jing region. Under Shui Rui's enlistment plan, in a few short days, many officials from the previous court came to surrender. After handing over a letter of recommendation, proof of allegiance, they either stayed in Jing and were reinstated, or moved out of Jing and took up their new posts. In one day the Emperor of Yen sent down multiple imperial decrees, rewarding the 3 armies and bestowing titles to those who had performed meritorious deeds. The one that attracted the most attention was undoubtedly Shui Rui. In order to show off his merits, the Emperor of Yen disregarded the voices of the minority and forcefully removed one word from his title of Changping Wang, bestowing him the title of Ping Wang. He became a king that was on the same level as the title, causing Shui Rui to be above the other officials and become the first person in court. Since ancient times, there had been many rulers who burned the bridge after crossing the river. It had always been that when the cunning hare was killed, the hound would be cooked, and when the birds were killed, the fine bough would be hidden. Yet the Emperor of Yen came from a military family. He had a heart of righteousness and couldn't do such a treacherous thing. Even more, his heart was like a clear mirror. He knew that the present situation was unstable and the people were in turmoil. It wasn't someone like Shui Rui who could help him stabilize the country. So he didn't doubt the people he used. The Emperor of Yen was righteous. Shui Rui knew his own limits. The day after he was bestowed the title of Ping Wang, he went to the palace to hand over the commander's seal. Without hesitation, he handed over the power to move 100,000 troops at will. This was a wise move. He had the world, and the emperor didn't hold back his thoughts. If he kept the military power, it would only cause the emperor to be suspicious. The disadvantages were greater than the advantages. Even more, his foundation in the military was strong. He didn't need that commander's seal. There were many of his former subordinates that obeyed his orders. The Emperor of Yen took back his military power but reassured him to continue leading the Shinji camp. He also bestowed him a red calligraphy iron plaque, also known as the Death Exemption Medallion. The day that Empress Dowager Wei arrived in Jing, the Emperor of Yen personally went to the city gates to welcome her as a sign of filial piety. Shui Rui was among them. Thousands of troops lined the road to welcome them. The scene was grand. After so many years, Empress Dowager Wei once again stepped into Enling City. Her mood was completely different from years ago. She still remembered that the two of them, mother and daughter, had been trapped in Jing City. Under Shui Rui's cunning, they had barely escaped and had the noble status they had today. Empress Dowager Wei wasn't an ungrateful person. She was grateful to Shui Rui. So even though she knew that Jiang Qia loved him, she couldn't force him to marry her daughter. The Emperor of Yen welcomed the Empress Dowager back to the palace. Mother and son had things to say, so they dismissed the others. Muhu must be tired from the journey. Zhen has already ordered people to clean out the palace of compassionate and peaceful for you to stay. My son is still the most filial. Empress Dowager Wei pulled his hand and patted it. She couldn't help but complain, not like your royal sister. It's like I owed her in my previous life. I can't stop worrying. The Emperor of Yen smiled. Did Hualan make you angry again? Zhen will definitely teach her a lesson later. Empress Dowager Wei took the chance to bring up the proper matter. If you have the heart, why don't you go and persuade that good brother of yours? Men should marry when they are of age. No matter how bad Hualan is, she is still the princess of our great Yen country. Is she not good enough for him? The Emperor of Yen instantly showed a troubled expression, wanting to speak but stopping. Empress Dowager Wei glanced at him. She only has one sister. You aren't willing to make a decision for her. The Yen Emperor had no choice but to tell the truth. It's not that I don't want to help her, but Shining already has someone he likes. He came to me just a few days ago, pleading earnestly for me to help him. Mother, you have never seen him like that. If I don't allow it, he might just resign and follow that woman to the ends of the earth. Zhen's foundation is not strong and is in need of people. How can he be left out? There was no other way, so I could only grant his marriage. Empress Dowager Wei gaped. A long while later she found her voice. Where did this kind of woman come from? From your tone, it seems that he has been bewitched by someone? The Emperor of Yen was unwilling to divulge too much about Shui Rui's private affairs, so he told her, it's not like you're unaware of Shining's background. Back when he was still in the capital, he had already made a vow of eternal love with that woman. Now that they've reunited, it's only natural that they continue their former fate. Empress Dowager Wei laughed in anger. Since he already had a marriage, why didn't he tell Hualan earlier? He made my son wait bitterly. The Emperor of Yen slightly furrowed his brows and said disapprovingly, didn't Shining reject Huang Mei at the start? He didn't say it out of consideration for his daughter's face. It was Hualan's one-sided wish. How can he be blamed for this? If Shui Rui and Jiang Qiuya had any feelings for each other in these years, he wouldn't have allowed Shui Rui to marry someone else. But he had seen with his own eyes that Shui Rui had retreated from Jiang Qiuya, and there was no ambiguity. Shui Rui had gone through life and death with him. The two had treated each other with sincerity and a deep brotherly love. Today he sat on the country. If he couldn't share half with him, was he going to interfere with his marriage? Wasn't that laughable? Empress Dowager Wei saw his expression wasn't right and knew that her son, the Emperor, placed great importance on Shui Rui. She couldn't force it. After some thought, she softened her tone and discussed with him, how about this? If he has someone he likes, let him take her as a concubine. Also marry Hualan to him. It's the best of both worlds and no one will be affected. But when the Emperor of Yen heard her idea, he instantly roared with laughter and asked her in response, does Muhu know who the woman Shining likes is? Empress Dowager Wei shook her head in puzzlement. The Emperor of Yen told her, that woman used to be the celestial commissioner of the previous dynasty, a first-grade official. She was once below one and above tens of thousands, famous in the world and known by everyone. If you want such a peerless and wondrous woman to be a concubine, Zhen is afraid that it will attract the curses of the world. As the saying goes, a scholar can be killed but not humiliated. Empress Dowager Wei was stunned. The Yen Emperor held her arm and advised in a low voice, you don't have to worry too much about this. I will pay attention to Hualan's marriage and choose a good husband for her. Even if he can't compare to Shining, he won't be too far off. Muhu must be tired. Zhen will send you to rest. There will be a banquet in the palace tomorrow to welcome you. You will be able to attend when the time comes. Having convinced Empress Dowager Wei, the Emperor of Yen released a long breath. He thought that he had done a good deed for his sworn deity. He was very proud inside, but it was a pity that he had no way to show it. When Empress Dowager Wei came to the palace of Compassionate and Peaceful, she didn't have the heart to admire the luxurious beauty of the palace. After she calmed down and thought, she quickly came out of her dilemma. It was true that she wanted Shui Rui to be her son-in-law,
but as a woman she was experienced. How could she not know that if a husband and wife wanted to live happily, they first had to have feelings? A melon that was forcefully twisted wasn't sweet. Shui Rui's heart already belonged to someone else. If she forced him to marry Jiang Mia, it would only have the opposite effect. Thinking this through, Empress Dowager Wei didn't have anything else to worry about. She put down the thought and sent someone to find Jiang Mia. She prepared to explain everything to her. Short pain was better than long pain. No matter what, she had to make her give up on Shui Rui. On the other side, Jiang Mia had just changed her clothes and was planning to leave the palace to find Shui Rui when she was stopped. She unwillingly came to the palace of compassionate and peaceful. Mohu. Empress Dowager Wei waved her hand and had her sit next to her. She waved away the palace maids in the hall and let her drink a mouthful of cold tea to calm her mind. She then said in a roundabout manner, Anling City isn't as big as Dedu. There are many talented youths. You don't like martial artists. Muhu will let your imperial brother pick a person to be your Fuma who is skilled in both the pen and the sword. What do you think? Jiang Mia was tired of hearing all this on the way here. Adding on that she was thinking about Shui Rui, she couldn't help but become irritated. I don't think so. Most of the men in this world are useless. How many are worthy of me? Do you have to force me to marry? Fine, I'll tell you directly. Other than Lu Shining, I don't want anyone else. Empress Dowager Wei's head hurt. She suppressed her anger and sneered, You like the other, but the other has to like you. If he, Lu Shining, liked you at all, even if Ben Gong had to press down on his head, I would make him marry you. But tell me, where does he seem to like you at all? Facing her own mother's merciless exposure, Jiang Mia was both embarrassed and angry. Her neck was red as she retorted angrily, I don't care if he likes me or not, as long as I like him it's fine. If he doesn't marry for the rest of his life, I won't marry for the rest of my life. The matters between him and me, you don't need to care. Empress Dowager Wei almost fainted. One hand pressed against her chest, the other pointing at her. She said in a trembling voice, You unfilial daughter, for an outsider, you are shouting at your mother. You really are lawless. Fine, I'll tell you the truth. He already has someone in his heart and doesn't care about you at all. Your imperial brother has already approved his marriage. Don't have any wishful thinking. Jiang Mia jumped up, glaring with a pair of crimson eyes. Nonsense, I don't believe it. Empress Dowager Wei fiercely slammed her palm on the tea table, shaking the cups and plates on the tray. If you don't believe it, go ask him yourself. Would I lie to you? Jiang Mia turned and left. Her steps were fast. Once she left Xianing Palace, she started to run. She wanted to rush in front of Shui Rui in the blink of an eye to ask if it was true. Empress Dowager Wei was very angry with her and didn't have the energy to restrain her. She thought that it was good to let her make a fuss. It would be best if she and Shui Rui became enemies and never interacted again. That would be less worrying. Jiang Mia left the palace gates and found out that Shui Rui was staying at Dingbo Hall. She whipped her horse and hurried over. She went to the door but found nothing. The guard at the door told her that Shui Rui hadn't returned to the Fu. When asked about his whereabouts, he said he didn't know. Today she had just returned to the capital, her eyes were completely black. How could she find him? She stood outside the Dingbo building for a while. The more anxious she became, the more angry she became, the more hateful she became. She was so hateful that her teeth itched. She thought, if Shui Rui really had a sweetheart, she would definitely whip that vixen to death. She dared to snatch her man, she was really courting death. At this time, a fast horse galloped over and stopped at the gates. A familiar person jumped off the horse. It was Shui Rui's vice-general, Sha Liao. Jiang Mia recognized the boy and instantly extended her whip to block his path. Who, princess? Where is Lu Shining? Sha Liao blankly replied, Wang Yi left the city to return to the camp. Jiang Mia frowned, wondering why Shui Rui would run out of the city in broad daylight. So she dragged him to a corner and interrogated him. Sha Liao had been whipped by her before, so he was a little afraid to confront her. But soon he told the truth. His Majesty asked Wang Yi to recruit some officials from the previous dynasty. There was a female minister among them. It was said that she was very capable, but she would rather die than submit to Great Yen. Wang Yi cherished talents, so he locked her in the camp and went back to persuade her every day. A woman? Jiang Mia narrowed her eyes and said in an unfriendly tone. She thought to herself, this female minister is most likely the vixen who seduced Shui Rui. Sha Liao nodded his head. He was a fool who could rarely read people's expressions. He could tell that the first princess was in a bad mood.
Taking advantage of the moment when she was lost in thought, he quietly moved to the side and was about to run away. Jiang Mia raised her eyelids and pulled him back by his ear. She said with a cold voice, "Where are you going? Tell me everything about that vixen before you leave." Where did this vixen come from? My dear Princess, Wang Yi has ordered me to do something important. Please be merciful and spare me this time. Xiao Liao covered his ear and begged for mercy. Don't play dumb with me. Let me ask you, when did that vixen seduce Lu Shining? Only then did Xiao Liao realize who she was scolding as vixen. He was dumbfounded and said, I don't know. Jiang Mia used all her strength to pinch his ear. Gnashing her teeth, she said, "Then you should at least know that fox spirit's surname and name and what she looks like." Ao, I know, she is the previous dynasty's imperial astronomer, Yushu. Yushu? Jiang Mia suddenly raised her voice. Yu Lianfang? Chapter 8:19. Yushu was in the Yin army camp these days. She was far away from the hustle and bustle and had a lot of leisure time. On the second day after she was imprisoned, Shui Rui brought over 2 maidservants from the Forgotten Opportunity building to take care of her daily needs. Not only that, but he also brought over a change of clothes and the kitchen maid that she was used to using. The only flaw was that the morning exercises in the army would start at the sound of the rooster and the noise from afar would disturb her sleep. The countryside was empty and the air was very fresh in the morning. But when the sun came out, the heat rose straight up. Yushu was not afraid of the cold, but she was a little afraid of the heat. Especially in the past few years, she was used to living a pampered life. Everything she ate and used was of the best quality. Her skin was not as rough as it was when she was young. She was as delicate as a princess or an imperial concubine. In the main tent of the camp, Yushu was lying on her side on a Persian carpet in only a strapless dress. Her feet were bare. The colorful carpet under her was made of fine cashmere mixed with ice. It was smooth and soft. It was comfortable and breathable to lie on. The edges of the 4 corners were inlaid with crystal-clear gems, each of which was expensive. Such a Persian carpet that was incompatible with the military camp was certainly not something that should be here. It was a foreign tribute. There were only 2 pieces sent to the palace. One was given to Empress Xia Jiang, and the other was given to her. The day before yesterday, Yushu mentioned it in front of Shui Rui. Yesterday he sent someone to her mansion to pack it and deliver it to her, so she could have a comfortable afternoon nap today. Most of the iceberg in the corner of the room had melted. The maids were gently waving their fans. There was a cool mint in the incense burner. When Yushu woke up, she smelled a trace of cold sweetness. She stretched and crossed her slender legs. The thin clothes could not hide her charming curves. Her hair was loose and a few strands fell beside her ears. It made her face so white that it was almost transparent. There was a rare bit of color on her lips, which was even more fragrant than rouge. Shui Rui walked in from outside the tent and saw the scene of naked bodies strewn all over the place. He felt as if his throat was about to spit out smoke. He paused, cleared his throat and said, "I know you're afraid of heat, but you can't dress like this just because it's cool. What if you catch a cold while lying on the ground?" Even though he said that, his eyes didn't move an inch away from her. Yushu didn't try to hide it and let him look at her. She said lazily, "It's so stuffy. It's more comfortable like this." The guards on duty outside were all Shui Rui's bodyguards. Under his orders, trespassers would be killed without mercy. Otherwise, how could she be so unscrupulous? Shui Rui waved his hand to dismiss the maidservant. He walked over to the clothes rack to remove his soft armor and washed his face with cold water. Then he returned to Yushu's side and sat down cross-legged. He picked up the fan on the coffee table and waved it in the direction of the 2. "The weather is hot, but you have to bear with it for another 2 days. I'll ask for an imperial edict to bring you back to the capital after the celebration feast tomorrow." He had been preparing for half a month just for this day. The reason why he proposed to use the former officials was not purely for the sake of the overall situation, but also because he wanted to let Yushu return to the imperial court with a justifiable reason. At that time, both of them could work together and no longer have any worries. Then he seemed to have thought of something. He smiled, shook his head and said to her, "I really didn't expect that after the recruitment, half of the people in the 3 divisions and 6 ministries have voluntarily surrendered to the Great Yen. Even those stubborn old men in the cabinet are wavering. Only you, the Celestial Commissioner, have been biding her time, waiting for you to come back and make the decision." Yushu was not surprised at all. Over the past 5 years she had been advancing step by step and had firmly grasped the Celestial Commissioner in the palm of her hand. When it came to dealing with the subordinates she was even tougher than Zhu Muzhao. In the 3 divisions and 2 ministries she was the only one who followed the lead. Even if there were some who disobeyed, she would suppress them and replace them one by one. And now the Celestial Commissioner was Yu Shu's word. Before the incident she had already made arrangements. Without her no one would dare to bow down to the great Yan. Hearing the sentiments in his words, she turned over and laid on the blanket. She crossed her fingers and held her chin, looking up at him and said in a coquettish tone, "We've been apart for 5 years. It's not a long time but it's not a short time either. You can command the 3 armies and conquer half of the country, but I can't even control the Celestial Commissioner? Am I really so useless in your eyes?" She laid on her stomach, revealing a large area of her fragrant shoulders. A pair of butterfly bones meandered down, outlining her supple waist. Looking further down there were undulating mountains and a line of valleys. It was faintly discernible, making one's imagination run wild. What a beautiful sight. Shui Rui was restless. He wished he could immediately press her under his body and look at her naked body. But he could only think about it. He still pretended to be serious and said, "I can look down on anyone but you. My Shu is the most capable. Otherwise, how could you make me fall head over heels for you?" It was hard to believe. Although the 2 of them had sex a few years ago, but after reuniting after such a long time, apart from the first night they slept on the same bed, they did not sleep on the same bed for the next half a month. He came back to the camp every day to meet her privately, but the most he did was to pinch her hands and kiss her face. He did not go any further. Yu Shu glanced at him and muttered in her heart. It was not that she wanted to do those shameful things with him, but he was always so indifferent that she could not help but doubt her own charm. After all, she was already over 20 years old. In ancient times she could be considered an old lady. It was one thing for him to be devoted to her, but it was another thing for him to fall in love with her. Thinking of this, she was displeased and immediately became stubborn. She didn't believe that he could escape from her grasp. "How come I can't tell that you're head over heels for me?" She propped her hands on the blanket, and like a slippery snake, she straightened her upper body and moved closer to his chest. She didn't care that this posture revealed the beautiful view of her chest, and she blew a breath of cold air on his Adam's apple. It was both teasing and seductive. Shui Rui felt as if he had been electrocuted, and he felt numb and limp. When he lowered his eyes and met her smiling eyes, he was instantly captivated by the seductive charm that appeared in her clear eyes. He tossed the fan to the side and reached out his hand to hook the back of her neck. He hugged her and rolled half around on the carpet before pressing her under his body. He had strong arms and a broad chest. When his hot lips touched the cinnabar mark between her eyebrows, the hot breath seemed to melt her. Yu Shu could not help her body becoming hot. She was waiting for his next move when she heard a bitter laugh from above her head. "Ah Shu, do you know how hard it was for me to endure?" Yu Shu curled her lips and wrapped her hands around his neck. She affectionately said, "Who told you to endure?" Shui Rui did not move. He only tightened his arms around her and whispered in her ear, "I couldn't control myself in the past. After the incident I hated myself. After we parted I had nightmares for several months. I dreamed that you were pregnant with our child and was humiliated. Ashu, when I wasn't by your side, you could only rely on yourself. Now that I'm back, I won't let you suffer even the slightest bit. I will ask the king to personally preside over the marriage. We will be a celestial couple that the world envies." There was no woman in this world who did not like to hear sweet nothings. But there were some men who only used flowery words to coax an infatuated heart. Once they got it, they would no longer cherish it. However, the man in front of her was full of sweet nothings and sweet nothings. He was holding his infatuated heart in front of her, just to let her see it clearly. It wasn't that he was not moved or that he did not desire it. It was because he cherished it too much that he could endure it. Yushu wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. The evil fire from before had faded. Her hands held his head and she raised her face to quickly peck the tip of his nose. "I've wronged you." She was deliberately seducing him earlier and was not ashamed. Now that she was calm, she felt that their chests were touching and their legs were rubbing against each other. She was wearing light and thin clothing, so it was really shameful. "Get up," she said. With the delicate body in his arms, Shui Rui was a little reluctant to let her go. He was afraid that things would go wrong, so he could only get up and let go of her. Once Yushu was free, she immediately got up and took half of her robe from behind the screen. She sat in front of the bronze mirror, untied her hair and combed it again. Shui Rui sat on the carpet and calmed down for a while. Then he followed her. He crossed his arms and leaned against the frame of the screen, watching her comb her hair. Her hair was very well maintained. It was black and smooth and it reached her waist. Yushu asked him as she combed her hair, "Empress Dowager arrived in the capital today. Didn't your father also arrive?" Shui Rui was not a stubborn person. He could not understand Yunhua's action of risking his life for his teacher's orders, but he would not be blinded by hatred. That was why he could let go of his grudge and recognize Yunhua as father and son. Yes. Yushu wanted to say something but stopped. She wanted to ask something but she could not bring herself to ask. Shui Rui peeped at her expression from the mirror. With his ability to observe people's words and expressions, how could he not know what she was thinking at the moment? They had been separated for more than 10 days. She did not ask, so he did not mention it. He knew that she was afraid that he would think too much and he was the same. If he could, he really did not want to mention that person in front of her. Unfortunately, he could not. Even if he did not mention it, she would not forget. Shui Rui secretly sighed, but in the end he still took the initiative to speak. It has been all these years. Don't you want to ask where Jing Chen has gone? Yushu's hand exerted force and broke a few strands of her hair. She frowned slightly and put down the comb. She let the hair that she had just coiled fall down like a waterfall and fall on her shoulders. She took a light breath, but she could not pretend that she did not care. I only know that you let Jing Ku take him away that year. On the day of her and Jing Chen's wedding, he chose to leave without saying a word, giving her the freedom that she had longed for a long time. Shui Rui took a few steps forward and came behind her. He picked up the comb and picked up her hair gently. Yes, it was me who persuaded Jing Chen to run away from the wedding. 5 years ago he came to Ningdong City, met me and my father and then left. He said that he wanted to go back to the sect to apologize. I once sent people to Shangxi to inquire about his whereabouts. I heard that although he returned to Dragon Tiger Mountain, he did not stay for a long time. I don't know where he is now. I don't know where he went, she murmured. She could not tell what she was feeling in her heart. Shui Rui tied up her long hair in a rather unskillful manner. He used a hairband that was woven from silk to wrap around her hair and tied it up tightly. Then he looked up and met her eyes in the mirror. Suddenly he saw her relieved smile, and his heart suddenly relaxed. He only felt that his previous worries were all unnecessary. Unfortunately, he can't come to our wedding. Chapter 820. The Emperor of the Yan Kingdom, Jiang Huaying, had proclaimed himself as the Emperor. He had already held a coronation ceremony in Ningdong City and announced it to the world. He was not an ordinary emperor who revolted among the people. He proclaimed himself the emperor in the northeast and then led his army south to attack the Yan dynasty. It could be said that he was expanding his territory, not rebelling. When the Yan army attacked Ling City, most of the nobles in the city fled, but some did not. The Emperor of Yan did not yell at them, but listened to Shui Rui's suggestion and confiscated half of their property, sparing their lives. At the beginning of the country, the Yan Kingdom's national treasury was empty, so this was a good opportunity to fill the gap, showing the emperor's generosity. Shui Rui was conferred the title of King Ping, and at the same time held several positions, becoming the first person under the emperor. King Ping, who had taken off his armor and changed into a brocade robe and jade crown, and restrained his murderous aura, looked like a handsome young master, graceful and elegant, except that his face was a little dark. The hall was full of singing and dancing and there were no empty seats. It was a scene of people toasting each other. But if one looked closely, it was not difficult to notice that the people of the two dynasties were in different shapes. The old officials who followed the emperor to conquer the country were naturally drinking without any scruples, while the old officials who came later were more cautious. They did not look happy but did not dare to show too much. Empress Dowager Wei sat on the side of the emperor and saw all these faces. She could not help but sneer in her heart. It should be known that the Jiang family had loyally guarded the bitter and cold land of the northeast for 100 years. Several generations of people worked hard and died, but what they got in return was the Emperor of Da'an's vigilance and suspicion. In the end, the emperor even used the lives of their orphans and widows to threaten the Jiang family to surrender. It was really disappointing. She did not regret encouraging her son to fight for the world. Otherwise, how could she have such honor today? Empress Dowager Wei drank a full cup of wine and glanced at King Ping, who was surrounded by people to toast. She felt it was a pity that the best son-in-law had no interest in her daughter. She could only watch as the cooked duck flew away. She turned her head and looked at the empty seat. Jiang Mia was nowhere to be seen and frowned inwardly. She beckoned for a servant to come forward and whisper, "Have you sent someone to summon Princess Royal? Why isn't she here yet?" As the only legitimate princess of Great Yan Dynasty, and the sister of the emperor, she should show up in a grand manner and be admired by all. How could she be absent? Empress Dowager, the princess is not in her bedroom. Someone saw her leave the palace and we don't know where she went. Empress Dowager Wei wasn't happy and reprimanded in a low voice. "Didn't I tell you to watch over her? Why did something happen?" The palace servants quickly knelt down to admit their wrongs. Empress Dowager Wei didn't want to attract attention and waved her hand for them to leave. Shui Rui noticed this scene and noticed that Jiang Mia was absent. However, he did not take it to heart and just thought that she was throwing a tantrum again. What he didn't expect was that before the banquet began, a horse galloped out of the palace, carrying a fiery red figure towards the camp outside the city. Yu Shu knew that there was a banquet in the palace tonight and that Shui Rui wouldn't be coming back. After eating dinner, she took a stroll outside the tent to digest the food. The summer days were long. The sun had just set and the surroundings of the camp were lit up with dots of fire. The light wind brought along a faint scent of cooking. In the past few days, the troops stationed outside the city had retreated, returning to their respective guard stations. The remaining 20,000 troops stayed behind to guard Shangjing. There was a fence outside the commander's tent, surrounding several tents. There was a team of bodyguards patrolling the perimeter of the fence. There were 2 people standing guard outside the commander's tent. They would change shifts every 4 hours to prevent random people from prying into the secrets of the army. The place Yu Shu stayed wasn't far away from Shui Rui's tent, and there was only a fence between them. For the sake of avoiding arousing suspicion, she'd always take a detour and didn't wander towards that direction. After living here for so many days, she was a little tired of eating and sleeping all day. Fortunately, she could return to the capital in a few days. Otherwise, if she stayed any longer, her bones would rust. Back in the tent, she asked someone to bring hot water. Yu Shu simply scrubbed and didn't bother washing her hair. She changed into a silk dress and went to rest. Because she was a light sleeper, the 2 maids pulled up the screen and quietly retreated outside to make a bed on the floor. At night, it was quiet inside and outside the camp, except for 1 or 2 coughs. Yu Shu didn't sleep well. When she was half asleep, a scream pierced through the night sky. She opened her eyes hazily, rubbed her forehead and sat up. She called the maid. "Where is she? Go out and see what happened." The maid obeyed and ran back in a panic after a while. "Master, there's a fire. There's a lot of smoke outside and the fire is not far away. Please get up first." At this time the movement outside became louder and louder. Cries for help came one after another. Yu Shu draped her robe over her shoulders and walked to the door to take a look. She saw not far to the west of the big tent, thick smoke billowed, carrying a gust of east wind and spreading the smoke. The fire was not small, it looked like the whole tent was on fire. The patrolling soldiers nearby all ran to put out the fire. People who were sleeping also ran out. It was a mess outside and for a moment, they didn't have time to care about Yu Shu. "Master, what should we do? Should we run?" Although the 2 maids were scared, they didn't forget to run for their lives. Yu Shu observed the direction of the wind. In about half an hour, the thick smoke would blow over. Even if the fire was extinguished, the smoke would still suffocate people to death. Thus, she quickly put on her clothes, turned her head and ordered, "Bring my blanket out. Don't take anything else." The maid hurriedly went in to roll up her precious blanket and followed behind her. The 3 of them passed through the fence unimpeded, circled around the place where the fire was, and trotted all the way to the windward side to hide. From afar they watched the soldiers fighting the fire come and go. "Yu Lianfeng." A voice suddenly sounded behind her. The cold tone was like a sharp blade cutting through the air. Yu Shu suddenly turned around and saw a figure walking out from the darkness a dozen steps away. The burning fire in the distance illuminated her red robe. Yu Shu's eyes flashed. She looked at the person walking towards her calmly. "So it really is you." Jiang Yan stopped in front of her and sneered. "No wonder he has always been hiding it. Brother and sister incest, only you can do it." Yesterday, when she entered the capital, Muhu told her that Shui Rui already had someone he liked and had asked Imperial Brother to approve the marriage. She just didn't believe it and wanted to find Shui Rui and ask him. When she killed her way to his residence, she was shocked to hear that the woman he hid in the camp was Yu Shu. It was like a bucket of cold water was poured on her head and she sobered up. She recalled that several years ago when she was in the capital, she saw this pair of brother and sister with different surnames being very close to each other. It was clear that they were secretly having an affair, which made her look like a fool who was kept in the dark. It was only now that she realized it. She had waited in vain for so many years. In the eyes of others it was just a joke. How could she not be angry? How could she not hate? Yu Shu saw the fierce expression on her face but was not afraid. She asked her, "Was it you who set fire to the camp in the middle of the night?" He hid you well. If it wasn't for this fire, how could you be forced out? Jiang Yan did not hide anything and openly admitted it. I knew you were stubborn. After so many years, it has only increased. Yu Shu shook her head. If Princess wants to see me, you only need to send a message and I would not dare to not see you. Why go through so much trouble? Haha, Jiang Yan lowered her head and laughed. She put one hand on her waist. When her laughter fell, a silver light flashed and a soft sword appeared in her hand. She took a step forward and pointed the sword at Yu Shu's throat. When she raised her head again, her eyes were filled with a fierce light. I want to see you to kill you. It happened so suddenly that the two maids were shocked. They wanted to call for help, but they were afraid that the sword would hurt their master. They were so anxious that their faces turned pale. They bit their lips and held back from shouting. The two turned their eyes and saw that their master was calm, not retreating nor dodging. Do you think that you can get what you want by killing me? For the sake of our past friendship, I will give you a piece of advice. The word marriage cannot be forced. Even without Jiang Yan's explanation, Yu Shu could guess why she wanted her life. It was because her love for Jiang Yan failed and hatred grew from love. Death is at hand, yet you are still so stubborn. For the sake of our past friendship, I will let you die a happy death. Jiang Yan's eyes were burning with flames. She did not waste any more words. With a flick of her wrist, the sword trembled and with a light flick, she was about to slit Yu Shu's throat. In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, a light snort suddenly entered her ears, filled with disdain. All the hairs on Jiang Mia's body stood up and she felt her wrist go numb. Her 5 fingers involuntarily loosened and the flexible sword in her hand strangely turned half a circle, away from that slender neck. A hand stretched out from behind her and firmly pinched the sharp tip of the sword with 2 fingers. Jiang Yan's eyes widened. Before she could react, another hand stretched out from behind her and locked her throat. A strong sense of danger assaulted her, causing her to be unable to move. Killing intent. There are countless people who want to kill me. If it was so easy for someone to succeed, I would have died hundreds of times. Yu Shu brushed away the hair on her forehead and raised her eyes to look at Jiang Yan who had been captured. She raised her eyebrows and smiled. Her tone was indescribably repulsive. You, Jiang Yan opened her mouth to speak, but the person behind her tightened his grip on her throat. Her neck turned red but she refused to give in. She forced herself to shout, I am the princess of the great Yan kingdom. If you dare to touch me, believe it or not, I will execute your entire family. Ayaya, so scary. Yu Shu caressed her chest, her face didn't have the slightest expression of being threatened. Gu Hong, use less force. If you accidentally kill Her Highness, I won't be able to save you. Behind Jiang Yan stood a black-clothed man who was half a head taller than her. He stopped the sword with one hand and grabbed her with the other, imprisoning her in front of his chest. This person was the mysterious guard sent by Zhu Muzhao's only son, Zhu Qingjue, to stay by Yu Shu's side after Zhu Muzhao's death. He was a peerless expert and his name was unknown. Humph. Gu Hong did not say anything and ignored Yu Shu. He loosened his grip a little, allowing Jiang Yan to catch her breath and not suffocate to death. It has been a long time since we last met. Let's talk somewhere else. Yu Shu patted the 2 maidservants who had survived the calamity and walked in front to lead the way. She asked Lone Swan to invite Jiang Mia to a nearby empty tent, and then she assigned the maidservants. One of them stood guard outside while the other went to report to Shui Rui's personal guard. She told him that she'd captured the criminal who committed arson and murder, and she would immediately send someone to invite Shui Rui back to the camp. After lighting up an oil lamp and placing it on the table, Yu Shu found a chair and sat down. She raised her head and looked at the furious Jiang Yan. She sighed and muttered, You made me unable to sleep well for the past half a month. I was waiting for you to come. Xia Jiangmin had dreamt that after the Yan army invaded the capital, there was a person dressed in red holding a sword to kill her. This was a murder disaster. Thus, ever since Yu Shu entered the military camp,
She had not let down her guard. The day before yesterday she had vaguely predicted that she would face a calamity today. Thus, she sent out a signal in advance for Gu Hong to lie in ambush nearby. As expected, Jiang Yan came. It was unexpected, but it was also reasonable. What gave her a headache now was how to deal with Jiang Yan. After all, this was the current emperor's younger sister. She could not beat or kill her. Even seeking justice would be difficult. However, she was not willing to let her off so easily. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.